303.
Oh, it says 303. Okay.
No, he just missed the first one. It's early yet.
I'm dyslexic, and you know that. All right. All right. Let me get this out. Senator, would you mind taking over?
Is it your bill? Yeah. All right.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I guess now I'm taking it over. Senator Avard, are you ready?
I'm ready,
All right.
and thank you, all of you up there.
We'll open the hearing then on Senate Bill 303. Senator
you very
Avard,
much.
you're recognized to introduce your bill.
And for the record, I'm Senator Kevin Avard, District 12, and I'm introducing SB 303FN. And this was basically a bill that was requested by the Department of Energy, and they're going to be here to testify specifically on all the details. And if you have any questions, go for it.
Well, any questions from the committee?
I know.
Seeing none.
Great way to start the year, but the department's here to explain
Awesome.
the necessary needs for this. So with that, thank you, Mr.
All right.
President.
I don't want to be president. Josh Elliott.
Yeah, so we have some sicknesses and some people out because of, they're doing some bills, and my goodness, it's a tough way to start the year. But with that, Josh, thank you very much for being here. And you're the only one to testify on this bill.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Josh Elliott, Director of the Division of Policy and Programs with the New Hampshire Department of Energy. So first off, thank you to Mr. Chairman for introducing this bill for us. So this bill before you makes several changes to the administration of the Renewable Energy Fund. The Renewable Energy Fund is funded through what are called alternative compliance payments that are made by electric distribution utilities as well as competitive suppliers if they cannot meet the requirements of the Renewable Portfolio Standards, or the RPS. These funds are then deposited into the Renewable Energy Fund, which are then used on projects which increase the number of RECs, or renewable energy certificates, that are available. The idea is a sort of a self-fulfilling cycle. These funds go to produce, go to projects that then produce more RECs that will, in theory, in future years, reduce the number of alternative compliance payments made in the future. So it's a sort of a cycle as it goes through. Mm-hmm. As part of this, these programs were originally developed through the Public Utilities Commission when they were developed, before the creation of the department. With the creation of the department, we have started to take a look at some of these programs, and we recently went through a stakeholder engagement process asking for public comment on a number of different factors and looking at the individual programs themselves. And this is sort of a representation of the first step in that process, not the last step, but the first step in that process, in looking at basically, are we making sure that these programs are effective? They're actually doing what they're intended to do. They're incenting new renewable energy facilities from being constructed in the state rather than just subsidizing ones that would have been built otherwise. And so this is sort of a representation of some of that stakeholder feedback in terms of looking at what we can be doing better, what can be more effective. Obviously, the energy sector is particularly dynamic with the move to renewables. Difference, there's a lot of, I should say, the energy sector is very dynamic with a variety of changes that are occurring, and that these programs need to keep up with those changes. So I'm going to do a section-by-section review of the bill, just so you know exactly what's going on here. So section 1, the one change that you see there is on line 13, which would allow the department to establish a battery storage program. Section 2, you see the changes on lines 21 and 22, just a date change. If you recall, actually probably not, well, Senator Burcell's on finance. And buried in House Bill 2, there were a number of changes made to when those alternative compliance payments are made. We did not also bump out the date of the annual report, which then compressed the time for being able to do those reviews of those numbers and make sure that they're actually correct and that we're charging companies the correct amount. So this just bumps out our annual report date by a year to accommodate that change. So we're just back to the original timeline. Section 3 directs the department to set up a specific program for political subdivision. So for cities, towns, counties, sewer districts, et cetera, a specific program for them in terms of coming in for looking for funding for these renewable energy projects. And then the language on lines 5 through 7 is basically the way that the apportionment mechanism works is that we're supposed to divide it between residential programs and commercial industrial programs based on what their usage is statewide in terms of electricity consumption. This language here, all this does is just says, okay, the municipal programs go first, and then when you're dividing out afterwards. So it's just the order of which it's done. Given for a political subdivision or municipal program, they're technically commercial, usually in most instances in terms of their rate class, but they're really benefiting the residents. So it's sort of this weird in-between thing that we thought it was easier just to set it out above and then split it out below. Section 4, I'm going to come back to in a moment, because that has a separate change that I'm going to talk about at the end. Within Section 4, Romans Section 11, which starts on line 32, page 2, just adds in battery storage projects again, reflecting that earlier change. And the changes in Roman 8 on page 3, line 2 and 3 is just a cleanup of the statute. When it was originally said we had to be done in a certain time period, this is just cleaning it up and just saying we're supposed to do these RFPs annually. Last piece is Section 5, is for the Residential Small Renewable Generation Incentive Program. This is a program that we solicited specific feedback on, that the universal consensus among the stakeholders was this program does not function as well as it should, and that something else needs to be done. This is the first step in this process. The way that the statute is currently structured, it is very strict. Essentially, we have to provide a rebate to anybody who has installed a system after 2008. So you could have done this, a decade ago and come in and get a rebate based on the way the statute's constructed currently. So this removes those specific requirements in the statute that give the department flexibility to engage with stakeholders to come up with a better program that is more useful and more beneficial, and it does truly incentivize additional renewable energy generation in the state. So it's not as though we don't want to do those types of programs. It's that we don't have the flexibility now. This gives us the flexibility to be able to make those program design changes. Again, incorporating stakeholder feedback, and again, this is the first step in the process. This is not the last step in the process.
And just for clarification, stakeholders are?
So we talk to folks, either whether they're solar developers or renewable energy, the biomass folks, your advocacy groups like Clean Energy New Hampshire, town energy committees, just random private citizens. So actually all the public comment is posted on our website. So we had comments from, I want to say it was around 18 different entities between either organizations or just individuals offering their feedback on the programs.
Thank you.
And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Did you want to go over, did I miss something on?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, there was the Section 4. So that strikeout on line 15 there on page 2, line 15 in Section 4. That is just another reference to the residential small renewable program. So that section, just as part of the cleanup, gets taken out as well.
Thank you. You did a great job. Questions from the committee? Senator Altshuler.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. Thank you for that in-depth deep dive. And the moment I was waiting for was the repeal of, on page 3, line 4, section 5. can you go through again why it's necessary to repeal this?
Sure.
And where the programming that is outlined in 5 through 7 and 9 is replaced somewhere else?
Yes, so the program,
It was real fast, so.
yes, no, that's quite all right. So it's sort of a two-part piece. So those, the way that the statute is currently constructed, it requires the Department of Energy to offer these rebates to anybody who has, any entity or any person who has a system installed after July 1st of 2008. The point of the Renewable Energy Fund is to incent new systems, not to subsidize ones that have already been built, right? If you have a solar array that you already installed in your house 10 years ago, you don't need money from the state to incent that system, right? You already paid for it, you already built it, it's already in production, you're already receiving the benefit from it through net metering as well. So you've already paid for it. These programs are designed to incent, basically get those projects that would not have otherwise been done over the finish line, not to subsidize projects that would have happened already. There's no income requirements, so somebody, you know, with a $5 million home wants to put on solar arrays, they can come in and get a rebate. In terms of that goal of incenting new production, rather than subsidizing production that already would have happened, sort of doesn't jive with how the statute is constructed. So the balance of that is the modification actually on page 2, lines 3 through the tail end of 6 there, makes it very clear that we can establish additional programs or we can modify existing programs. But even that language, so we have the ability to go out and create a new program in its place for residential customers.
Okay. May I follow up?
Yeah, follow.
So I understand the argument you're making that it, you know, that the date of July, what is it here? July 1st of 2008, located on or the owner's residence, is an older date, and you know, just for the sake of argument, when you take out a HELOC to do projects on your house, just because it's 10 years later doesn't necessarily mean that HELOC has been paid off or not been refinanced. So it's, you know, maybe we don't assume that that's all paid off. My concern is that this takes away a program that we have, and if the concern is that it's old, why not make the date a little more current and also give yourselves the opportunity to develop more programs? But to take away a program that we have and then kind of throw it out there that we may do something leaves a gap. So, yeah.
Yeah, if the committee would like to specify in the statute that the department must develop a residential program, I'd be happy to do that. I'm willing to give you my commitment here on record that that is what we're going to do. If the committee would prefer to insert a specific language directing us to do that, I would consider that a friendly amendment. The statute as it's constructed also has a number of other, that's sort of the more obvious ones. For example, we wouldn't be able to do means testing for the program as well. So if we were to design a program that provided, say, paid for, I'm making up something, so we want to go through the stakeholder process to figure out, you know, what does the market look like? What do we need to do? Where's the real points where we can put money where it's going to be the most effective? You know, if we were to design a program for lower moderate income households, or maybe focus more on the moderate income households, of being able to, for example, pay for 75% of the cost of installing a solar system or something like that. Current statute doesn't allow us to do that. We're not allowed to do means testing. It has to be open to everybody and anybody. You know, if I had an unlimited budget, this would be a different question, but budgets are limited and we only get what we get from those ACPs. So it's a way of being smart with the dollars that we have and make sure the folks who can't afford the systems, but may want to do them or need a little bit of money. Maybe they can't, maybe they can afford a quarter of the system. And I'm making up numbers. I don't know if that's the right number or not.
I understand the point
But-
you're trying to make, yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
Further questions? Seeing none,
Still
thank,
not understand it all, but I think so.
I have written testimony coming around too, so if that might help as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
we get that.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Josh, we really appreciate it, and no further questions, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Does anybody else want to testify on this particular bill? Heidi? Come on down. Limited money due to constraint, budget constraints, and you have the floor, welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I did sign up on that sheet, but I think I was a little late, so I apologize. I think you had already gotten one, and I
Yes.
signed up on a different one. So, good morning, members of the committee. My name is Heidi Kroll. I work at Gallagher, Callahan, and Gartrell, and I'm here today on behalf of the Granite State Hydropower Association. I signed in neutral on the bill. We just wanted to, I guess, offer a couple of comments or observations. As Josh Elliott described, the Renewable Energy Fund has been used to fund renewable energy projects. It's funded through alternative compliance payments. So if there are load-serving entities out there that have not purchased renewable energy certificates, then they can comply with the law by making these alternative compliance payments, and that money goes into the fund. And the idea, as he described, is that if there's a shortage of renewable energy certificates, then the alternative compliance payments are made. That money is there to help fund new projects, and hopefully those new projects produce RECs, and it helps kind of balance with the supply and the demand in the market, a kind of a self-equilibrization mechanism. And so the thing that we simply wanted to flag with respect to the storage, the energy storage, is that that's really not it's not a generator. It's not, to the best of my knowledge, it's not generating RECs. So, I think if we're going to start diverting funds from the Renewable Energy Fund to things that are not generating RECs, we just need to be aware of that we're making that decision. As far as I know, there's not really a lot of policy around energy storage yet, to the best of my knowledge, in the New Hampshire laws, in terms of how the storage is going to function and what it's going to be paired with. I mean, obviously, it's a very important piece in making the transition to more renewable energy. It can help, obviously, store energy for times of high demand or trying to match better, either peak demands or when the demands are versus when the renewable energy is being generated. But I think we want to be specific, at least, that if we're talking about energy storage, that it is energy storage paired with renewable generation, because I think in theory, energy storage could be paired with something that's not renewable. I don't know that that's necessarily happening, but I don't know that there's any reason why it couldn't happen. So I think we want to just be careful about that. Later in the bill, there's a section, and I'll find it in a minute, but it eliminates the requirement for the DOE to select winning projects in the competitive grant program in a timely manner. That's the phrase that's used. I think that language has been in statute for a while, and as far as I know, it's been working fine. I know it's a little vague and flexible, but I think we'd be concerned about removing that without any sort of guidance around either a time frame or just making sure that things are being done in a timely manner. So I'm not sure why that needs to come out. As far as I know, it's been working fine, but just wanted to flag that if the idea is to remove that phrase, which I do think gives some flexibility.
Page three.
Let me find.
That's the one you're talking about, right?
Winning project, yes, I see that stroke, yeah.
And then with the municipal program using, having a dedicated program for the municipalities. No problem with that, and as I understood it, the way that Josh Elliott described it, that the money for that program would kind of come off the top, and then remaining renewable energy funds would be allocated between the renewal of residential and the CNI, the commercial and industrial. And because there is such a limited amount of money in the renewable energy fund, I think we just want to perhaps provide some guidance about what share of the fund the municipal program might get, just so that we're not using all of the fund on a municipal program and shortchanging the residential and the CNI programs. So some sort of balancing there. I don't have a particular recommendation about what that allocation should be, but I just wanted to flag that you know, we're working with a pretty small fund to begin with. So, those are my comments. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions from the committee?
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, sorry.
Almost. Do you, thanks for coming in today, by
Sure.
the way, and appreciate your thoughts on this. Do you see the battery storage as being anything that hydropower would be able to use? I'm trying to kind of, in my head, imagine what that would look like.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea with battery storage is that it's an option certainly on hydro sites or any other renewable sites, solar, I guess potentially even wind. So yes, and as I mentioned, it's definitely an important piece in making sure, as folks know, I mean, you know, with hydropower, a lot of what we have here in New Hampshire is run of river. That means as long as the river is flowing, the hydropower is being produced 24/7. And so it's a little bit more of a base load generation than, for example, solar, which is only generating at certain times of the day. But definitely battery storage is certainly an important aspect to either a hydro site or any other renewable site in terms of storing the energy and then making sure that it's available when the demand is there, whether it's a peak demand or just you know, our cycles of the day.
I mean, I can definitely understand it in solar and wind because they're very unpredictable.
Yep.
You know, I just was trying to think of that in my head. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. No, it is something that the hydro generators here in New Hampshire are definitely thinking about and looking at, as are the other renewable generators. Yep.
Thanks for coming in.
Sure. Thank you.
Yes, no, thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah.
As Heidi mentioned, that is correct. We could, regarding battery storage, they don't necessarily generate new RECs. It is something we heard from stakeholders where they'd be interested in something with battery storage. If it's the will of the committee, you know, you could either put in paired with some renewable generation, or you could strike it entirely. It was a suggestion that came in. You know, that's not something, not a hill I'm going to die on, but you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that we did solicit the question. A number of folks, stakeholders were interested in having this option for battery storage.
As far as the shared municipal fund,
yeah, if it would be, I have no objection to that. You could put in an amount. It would depend on how much you would want to see going to cities, towns, counties, municipalities, things like that. Mm-hmm. You could put a number in there. For example,
just some kind of guidance. So as far as how do we come to?
Yeah. So there's the existing LMI Community Solar Program has a requirement that we do at least 15%. So it sets a floor rather than a ceiling on it. It would be really within the purview of the department to sort of set those budgets as we usually do. If the legislature wanted to give us guidance and say, you know, you shouldn't be spending any more than blank amount, or a percentage would be the easiest way to do it, because that way, because the budgets vary from year to year depending on what the ACPs are.
Is there like a national average or something like that?
Not really, because each state sort of has their own way of how they do these things. Yeah. You know, if you wanted to, you could put a cap and say, you know, I don't know what the right number would be off the top of my head, but you could say, you know, it shall not exceed more than blank % of whatever the budget for the year is. You know, we do our best to keep these programs open and running rather than opening and closing. So it would be up to the discretion of the legislature if they wanted to put that cap in, or if they wanted to give the department the ability to spend more on certain programs, depending on what the need is.
Right, right.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, you may.
Do you, in your opinion, do you feel that the municipal projects probably are the larger dollar ones more than the private ones tend to be?
A lot of the municipal projects that have come in, we usually see through our competitive program, so they have to be something that's not just your run-of-the-mill biomass or run-of-the-mill solar installations. Usually they involve some sort of combined systems where they're doing either centralized heating with some other attributes or things like that, or district heating systems or things like that. Or we see a lot of small-scale hydros come in on that program as well. So the municipalities really don't have a place to go necessarily. We have a program that we're setting up. We have limited federal dollars that we're sort of setting up as a pilot program that we've seen, that we've at least heard. The RFP has not gone out yet because we're waiting on federal guidance on a couple of things. But we've heard substantial interest from municipalities that they'd like to have some funding source available. We'd have to go through program design, solicit feedback from folks like the Municipal Association, look at town energy committees, figure out, that those are all things that have to plug into municipal budgets. What the right number is, if it's, we pay for half the cost, or if we sort of prorate it, or we do, there's a variety of other just sort of design mechanisms that you can look at, whether, you point it towards to communities that may not be able to afford it. There's a variety of things you can do for that. But we've seen, again, anecdotally, that there's a strong interest among municipalities for funding to be able to do solar projects specifically.
Right.
Follow up.
Yeah, follow.
I guess more of what I was looking for is if we're looking at putting a percentage ratio cap, are the municipal projects bigger? Should it be
I'm sorry, yes.
75% of the funding available, or 50 or 30? I'm just sort of looking for a little guidance on what
You got a
that
floor
number
of
is.
15% right now.
Yeah, so we've done for the last year we did $3 million. This current year we've done $4 million in allocation. So that would give you a sense if you were to do how much money. Part of it has been, if we have newer refreshed programs, it would be easier to sort of increase those allocations out. Again, it would be limited by however much money comes in, though. So this would give us sort of that. But in terms of the it really would depend on the community. Because if they have a wastewater treatment plant or a water treatment plant that uses a lot of electricity, it would be a larger project. If it's a smaller town that maybe they just have, they're putting something on the fire station or the public safety building or one of the schools in town, it would be a smaller dollar amount. But in terms of the individual projects, I think the percentage number would be the easiest way to go, because then it could float with depending on what ACPs come in with, and that way we're not fixed with a dollar amount where there's either exceeds the amount of money we have or it's so tiny we would prefer to expand it.
Do you have a number you'd like to suggest that we put in that? I guess that's more what I'm looking for.
Okay, yeah.
You can get back to us on that.
Yeah, I would want to take a look at everything that we have now and make sure that by doing something we're not inadvertently shortchanging somebody else.
Right. Yeah.
But I could take that back to the office, talk with some folks, and see about
Just give us
a
an
number.
idea.
Yeah, it'll be a round number though. It'll end in a 5 or a 0.
Well, final thing, therefore, the select winning the project in a timely manner.
Yeah, that was, if there's consternation about that, I think the only thing you would need to just strike out is the thereafter, and you can leave and select winning projects in a timely manner. I have no objection to that, but I think that you would, for grammar's sake, you would want to strike out the thereafter at least.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you coming back. I see Cliff, you're here. Any comments? I know you're in support, but you didn't want to speak. Nothing, just you like it. That's all good. All right. And Nick,
I would say the idea of coupling.
if you can,
Yeah.
if you don't mind.
I
We value your opinion.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would say Heidi Kroll's suggestion that perhaps you state that storage be coupled with renewable energy makes sense. Clifton Below. Yes, on behalf of the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire.
Do you have any ID, please?
Making sure.
Just teasing.
Okay.
Thanks, I really appreciate it. Thank you. With that, we have nobody else wanting to testify. Anybody here want to speak up? Oh, I got a hand. Yay. Come on up.
I just have goodies for you.
You have goodies for me. All right.
Paper. We need more paper.
You don't want to talk? With that, we will close the hearing on SB 303, and thank you very much. And Senator here? Yeah. You're next, I believe. There's a lot. It just, the rabbit hole just keeps getting. Oh my gosh, yeah, I want to do a study committee on this so that they refresh everybody eventually. No, give it to him, he took them.
The vice chair is doing something.
He's doing something, he's worth something. And with that, thank you, Senator Perkins Quokka, for being here today.
Yes.
Happy New Year.
Nice to
And
see you guys.
I hear you're here to introduce SB 450.
I am.
Welcome to the committee.
Thank you
You
so
have the floor.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, I am Senator Rebecca Perkins Quokka from Senate District 21, City of Portsmouth and surrounding towns. I'm here to introduce SB 450, an act relative to the duties of the Grid Modernization Advisory Group. This bill amends RSA 12P16-2A, adding a new subparagraph that requires the Grid Modernization Advisory Group to provide specific recommendations regarding long-term transmissions planning pursuant to integrated resource plans. Our transmission grid is our highway for the electricity generated by our various suppliers throughout the state. We wouldn't let our highways fall into disrepair, and when we upgraded them, we would use best practices and the most up-to-date technology. We have a capital improvement plan for our highways, where we plan and stage multi-year investments in our infrastructure. Why leave out our transmission grid, the essential highway by which our homes are heated, our small businesses run, and our industries create exports? An integrated resource plan is like this capital improvement plan for our grid. It is a multi-year planning and investment strategy that is proposed by the utility who operates the transmission grid to the PUC. PUC would review such plan based on certain criteria, which hopefully our advisory group can recommend, and thus our infrastructure is maintained through private investment that meets our state policy goals. SB 450 will promote a proactive approach to our energy infrastructure, which allows us to do our job, create clear, stable rules, which allow our businesses and residents to function and thrive. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions from the committee? Just smiles.
That's good.
Yes, Senator Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much. Good to see you.
Thank you. You too.
Is there a recommendation as to the size of the advisory group?
I think the advisory group, and there's probably folks.
To change, to
Behind
change
me
what
that can-
existed.
Yes,
Yeah, but
exactly.
This is a new duty, but same people, new stuff?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so. I mean, those in the room, if they have any comments on it, can sort of talk to the scope of the group. But, the hope is that this is sort of an important piece of the group's work. And so it's a reasonable thing to add into their scope. Yeah, thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you, Senator.
All right,
Appreciate
thank you,
it.
guys.
Cliff, I know that, Clifton, you're in support, not wishing to speak, but you're still in support. Okay. Nick, you're in support. Nick, where are you? Nick Paul? You're definitely in support. All right, and those are the only people that are in support along with Senator Perkins Quokka. So now we are going to hear from Josh Elliott, the Department of Energy. You're our final speaker. We need some music.
I'm not very
Too much dead
musical, I'm
air.
sorry.
That's all right.
I just vamp.
Dun, 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 dun.
Depending on how people feel about my testimony, I'm sure people would have different
We
musical
value
choices.
your opinion, no matter what it is.
Yes. So, good morning. Again, Mr. Chairman, for the record, Josh Elliott, Director of the Division of Policy and Programs for the New Hampshire Department of Energy. The department is opposed to this bill as introduced, not opposed to the concept, but just of where it's placed. So the Grid Mod Advisory Group looks at a variety of things, but in particular, they have a specific duty to, and it's in my letter, so I won't spell out all the duties, but the particularly difficult one shall review the different cost structures that enable reasonable portion of cost of distributed generation storage interconnections to be shared by entities that interconnect to future distribution generation or storage to the distribution grid, and to the extent that subsequent interconnection is enabled by investment or cost incurs by the prior entity or entities that interconnect. I know a lot of words say a lot of things. But essentially, this is a very difficult question that the Grid Monitor GMAG is looking at right now, in terms of how do you apportion those costs. If somebody basically think of this like a road. If you have a development going in, somebody wants to build in all the way in the back, they pay for the road going all the way in, and then a whole bunch of other businesses sort of build up alongside that same road and are able to take advantage of that infrastructure. And the question is, okay, how do you apportion those costs? Are there recovery mechanisms available? And the way that that is a particularly weighty question, and that my colleague who actually sits on the GMAG wished to be here today, unfortunately is tied up with a rate case hearing happening at the same time right now at the Public Utilities Commission. This is a particularly big question. They have a lot of other big questions that they're already concerned that they would not be able to get their work done by the deadline that is cited as September 1st of 2024, which is not very far from now. The makeup of the Grid Mod Advisory Group is really very distribution grid focused rather than transmission grid focused. So it's not that the department has objections to taking a look at this. We do interact with our regional partners on these issues. We have folks who just specifically pay attention to this process, which is usually undertaken by ISO New England, which is the grid operator. So they are the ones that have the jurisdiction over all of the interstate transmission lines, as well as through NESCO, which is the New England Committee on, New England States Committee on Electricity. There we go. And we participate as part of that process of being on that committee, where they look at transmission projects. They look at including projects needed for the reliability of the grid, market-efficient transmission, competitive transmission, and then public policy-driven transmission. So there's this sort of entity at the regional level that sort of looks at all these issues. That being said, if the state wanted to take a look at this, it might be a better duty. I know you have a study committee bill that might be heard later this session. Might be worth folding that into that rather than having this specific group. And those members of that Grid Mod Advisory Group were pointed for their expertise in the distribution grid area. I would add they do have the ability to look at this. The enabling statute does allow them to look at transmission if they'd like to, rather than a sort of specific charge with a specific deadline. So I would just be concerned that the department's concern is really that by adding this additional duty in with such a short timeline, it would sort of inadvertently disrupt the current work that the Grid Mod Advisory Group is working on. Again, if there were another home for this, I think that might be a better solution that sort of gets everybody what they're looking for, rather than having this specific group take a look at it.
Questions from the committee? Senator, do you have a question? Okay. Yeah. Well,
Always happy to chat.
I mean, you're welcome to participate in the conversation, obviously. Yeah, just.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. No, I'm definitely open to the department's feedback, and I think you've made some really good points. I think I'd like to talk with you about what the details of what the cost structures you guys are looking at, because I do think sort of setting the criteria, for how those costs are approved in front of the PUC could be a very useful collaborative function of specifically the people that have the expertise that have been appointed to this group. So we can chat?
Yes.
offline and maybe work on an amendment together.
Fantastic. Yep.
Okay.
We're open to amendments and we can get this solved. Good,
All right, thank you,
appreciate
Chairman.
it.
I'll send Cam an email.
Okay.
Josh, thank you very much. We
Thank you.
appreciate you. Any further questions? Oh, Senator Pearl had a question.
I'm gonna let them do this.
He's going to let you do your thing. It's your thing. Do what you want to do. All right. With that, we have nobody else wanting to testify. Does anybody else want to pipe in? Seeing not, we're going to close the hearing on this. Oh, there you go. Get to do that. Are you ready? And now we're going to hear from the Vice Chair for Energy and Natural Resources, Senator Pearl, as he introduces 388 FM. Welcome, Senator Pearl.
Good morning, committee. For the record, my name is Senator Howard Pearl from District 17, representing 12 towns, which include my hometown of Loudon, which we had an earthquake yesterday, by the way, centered in Loudon. So we're still here. Yes, I know it's not something that happens on a regular basis. I don't know, I was here, I didn't feel it. All right, I am here to introduce Senate Bill 388. This bill makes some technical changes to the, actually I lost my notes, sorry. Makes some technical changes to some things that Josh is going to explain to you. How's that? Is that fair, Josh? That's fair. And I would ask that you actually give him all of the questions, and I'm going to let him explain it, because he explained it to me the other day, and I'm not sure I 100% got it yet either. So with that, I'd ask you to bring Josh up and let him explain exactly what this does.
Thank you, Senator Pearl. And we have about 30 people opposed to this bill. Just kidding. Just kidding. Josh, we appreciate your input. And for the record, we do not have 30 people opposed to it. In case anybody is actually taking me seriously.
Say this would be an interesting one for people to be opposed to, but you know, I don't know what I don't know.
Energy is a very complicated topic.
Oh, it is. Good morning again, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I am still Josh Elliott, Director of the Division of Policy and Programs, the Department of Energy. First, a thank you to Vice Chair Pearl for introducing this bill for us. With the department's creation a few years ago, as we periodically go through, there's always a couple of things that we find that could be adjusted or tweaked within the statutes that we have oversight over. And this bill is a representation of those couple of those issues that we have found. So I'm going to do a section-by-section walkthrough just to explain exactly what is done in this bill. So sections 1 and 2 just add the department to the statutes that compel utilities to comply with our orders, as well as the penalty mechanism. So section 1 is just making sure that they do so. Section 2 is the penalty mechanism, so it's the similar authority and powers that the Public Utilities Commission has. Section 3 is just a technical cleanup regarding community solar projects. This came through as Senate Bill 270 2 years ago. There's just a strike of the word homeowners and including the phrase households instead. Just makes the statute consistent. Household is used throughout rather than the phrase homeowner. Household obviously includes renters. Homeowners has a very specific definition of somebody who actually owns their living their home. There we go. Yes, as the title would suggest. Section 4, I understand there's been some consternation with the inclusion of this language. So the department is asking that for an amendment that just drops section 4 entirely. So this would revert everything back to the public. Yes. Revert everything.
All of section 4?
Yes, the entirety of section 4. Very easy and clean. Section 5 and Section 6 are actually also included in Senate Bill 303 that we discussed earlier. So this is just moving those report dates for the annual report for the Renewable Energy Fund from October to November of each year. Again, because of the changes made in House Bill 2, regarding when alternative compliance payments were made were pushed back to stay within a fiscal year. However, we didn't give us also enough time to push back the annual report, inadvertently shrinking, compressing the amount of time that would be available to actually go through and vet those payments and make sure that they are correct and the correct amounts. So this just restores the original timeline given by used by the department to actually go through and vet those payments. Section 7, this is sets up a timeline for when an assessed entity requests an exemption from the department. So what we do as an agency, we assess all of the entities that we regulate. So it's the utilities, think of your usual utilities, so natural gas, electric, in limited cases water, as well as phone in certain circumstances. But we also assess competitive suppliers, aggregators, those types of folks for the regulatory functions that we do. As part of that process, there's an exemption in statute, you can read there, that any entity that it's on line 3, earns less than $10,000 in gross revenue during the preceding fiscal year shall not be liable for assessment pursuant to this chapter. So if you're not making a ton of money, you have less than $10,000, you can request an exemption. Unfortunately, the way that a lot of this works is that we will go through the entire process of trying to determine what the assessment should be. It's similar to doing property taxes, right? If you make certain assumptions based on what you think is your base, and then you have what is needed to run the agency, and you have to match those numbers, I should say the amount that is budgeted by the legislature to run the agency, and to be able to figure out that amount. Unfortunately, what happens a lot of times, there are some entities that are very good about this, where they will send in their request, their exemption request, like clockwork, to make sure that it is done prior to that whole assessment process happening. Unfortunately, we run into a situation of where we will send out, we'll basically go through all the calculations to figure out what the assessment should be for all these entities. And then we'll get, in response, rather than the amount paid, an exemption request saying, oh, well, we made less than $10,000, we want to be exempt. Fortunately, that throws the whole system off because you've already done all these calculations and you have to recalculate everything again. In order to avoid that, this would set a specific deadline for when exemptions need to be filed. So it's sent the window and then require an exemption to be filed by July 30th of every year using a form that we create. And that way there's sort of that deadline rather than sort of back and forth and recalculating. It saves a lot of work on a lot of folks' parts within the department in terms of doing this calculation. So rather than sort of this after the fact, it would be a nope, you have your window, let us know, okay, you think you're exempt, send us the form, okay, great, you're all set, and then we do our calculations rather than trying to continually readjust. And we get, I'm talking to our business office, we receive between 20 and 30 of these in any given year, and they're all aggregators. So these, and I asked some of our staff, I'm like, okay, well, why have they done this? Yeah, why are there folks who have less than 10,000 in revenue? There are some companies that, either they're in the process of building up their book of business or they're winding it down, or you have others where they basically have filed to operate in New Hampshire. They haven't made the business decision yet if they're going to operate or not, but they've at least gotten their license or their registration with us, but they haven't done any revenue. So they're still on the books, they still get assessed, but then they can request this exemption.
So most of them are aggregators, you said?
Yes, most of them are aggregators. So they may have, they may be operating in neighboring states and say, oh, we might want to do New Hampshire at some point, but we're not sure yet. They'll go through the process so that way when they make that business decision, yes, we want to participate in the New Hampshire market, they've already gone through the process. They're just off to the races. They don't have to go through the registration process. So a lot of them will register and just hang on to these. Even though they may not necessarily do business, may have done it in the past, but maybe do it in the future. So it's a little bit of an insurance policy for them. Yes. So this just cleans that up, makes it clear how that process is supposed to work, and avoids a lot of work on both ends, to be honest. And the last one, this is regarding personal wireless services devices. This repeals a number of sections of RSA 12K dealing with wireless services. This is a holdover from when the Office of Strategic Initiatives had this original duty. It's no longer really in the core function of the Department of Energy. everything, I will say. The repeals just repealed the department's involvement in this. This does not change anything to how towns regulate cell phone towers. All of the duties and powers that they have currently are unaffected by these repeals. So it just takes the department out. There were some discussions about, model ordinances and things like that. Every single town we've had conversations with the municipal association just to make sure, all of the communities either have on their books, have some sort of ordinance already governing these things. This original statute dates back to, I think, I want to say at least 2014, if not earlier than that. So, I know. Well, it hasn't been It hasn't been really. It predates the existence of the department as well as So these provisions are no longer necessary, and they really don't fit with the core functions of the department. So we're asking for them to be repealed. Again, all the town's abilities to regulate cell phone tower location completely left intact.
Well done. Questions from the committee?
Not a question, but I will thank Josh for explaining the bill so that maybe I can understand it. You see why I didn't do it? Thank you, Josh.
Senator Waters.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and thanks, Josh. So I appreciate the decision to remove Section 4, but it does raise an issue. We have this bill, and there are a couple of things that I want to get your response to because of the nature of the bill and what we might be thinking about in terms of it. A lot of us have been working on the energy storage and how we're regulating that for quite a while now. And we made some progress last year. We've done a little something every year. I think that it's pretty clear that storage has become a much larger part of the energy landscape. And so I worry a little bit about, whether or not there's a sense from your perspective as to whether the commission is moving quickly enough on dockets and whether that work is getting done in a way that the industry kind of can respond to. And if there are concerns about that, would this bill be a way of perhaps tightening up a little bit the expectations of PUC timelines and actions on storage, or what's your experience of that?
I would not want, I think you may be better served by asking folks who are involved in the industry about how they see the Public Utilities Commission. I think it would be, I don't think it would be my place to comment on the processes of an administratively attached agency.
No, I know, but I wanted to bring it up because
that's fair.
If we're going to make, if this is going to be a successful part of New England's, of New Hampshire's energy future, legislature is supposed to make sure that we have processes that actually are functioning. So if I may ask another question. And then another one, and I am asking to speculate a little bit, but here we are. That I'm increasingly not exactly sure that I see that the distinction between distributed energy resources and battery storage is really a meaningful distinction anymore. That in some ways they are all blending into the same system, and that by trying to pick out each of these separately, maybe we're missing the big pictures. What's your? Again, I'm asking you your sense of where you, from the Department of Energy's perspective, is where these resources and the evolving nature of distributed energy seems to be going, and maybe we need to rethink the separation a little bit because they seem that they're going like this from now on.
You could probably follow at least an entire committee hearing just on that topic. Yeah. It's storage is one of those things I'm personally pretty bullish about. If you see it, it removes that uncertainty in that we talk about load following, dispatchable, used to be referred to as base load, but load following and dispatchable resources. Most renewable energy sources do not have those attributes, which are important for the stability of an electric grid. You pair in battery storage, and all of a sudden that doesn't become an issue. Now, there's questions about longer-term duration battery storage, and there's other projects, very interesting ones looking at that, including using iron air battery storage, which you don't get any issues with lithium. But in terms of, and I think your question is more pointed at the regulatory, how we regulate both of, should it be considered something similar? it's, I don't know if I could encapsulate it in such a short amount of time. I would want to think about it a little bit more, rather than saying something off the cuff. I'd want to sort of sit down and think through the question a little bit. But I'm happy to follow up with you and have further conversations about that.
Thank you, and I mean, we do have this bill, and I think that I want to touch base on it because I do think it's emerging as a kind of, maybe we could get a little further on it. And if I may, just one more, Mr. Chairman. One of the concerns I had about part 4 here, and also the previous bill with the grid modernization group and so on, is to ask whether or not you think the department has sufficient resources to put to all the tasks that are before you, and particularly to be able to act in a timely fashion. And if not, might this bill be a vehicle for increasing recoverable costs for the operations of DOE? Next budget, if to deal with personnel, but you see, I mean, I've been concerned a little bit about it, that whether or not you actually have the resources, because again, the industry is in a hurry, and they want to be able to have the agencies be able to get things done in a timely fashion.
Yeah, no, and that's, we are here to make sure that, that the department is a help, not a hindrance, to, proliferations of technologies and things like that. In the sense of, while also looking out for the ratepayer who may or may not be participating in those technologies. I can speak, at least a lot of the bandwidth in the department has been focused lately on the federal funding applications for both the Investment Infrastructure Jobs Act, or the BIIJA, or the BIL, depending on what you prefer, and then the IRA. So I'm happy to have further conversations about that. In terms of, I want to check. I know what I have in my division. I would want to check with my colleagues in other areas, as well as leadership in the department, before saying something publicly about, yes, we need this, or no, we don't need this.
Well, thank you, because I think the opportunity is there in this bill or another one, that if that really is an issue, that we might be able to do something. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
I appreciate that concern. Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Josh. And if you don't mind sticking around, I might call on you again.
Okay, fair enough.
So we have Mike Licata in support, not wishing to speak. I'm not speaking loud enough. There we are. Mike Licata from Eversource is in support, but not wishing to speak. We have Nick Paul, who's ambivalent about it and not wishing to speak.
Sorry, I don't wish to speak, but we oppose it.
Oh, you oppose it? Okay.
Sorry if I missed the box.
That's all right.
Can I ask the question? Nick, is that with the excision of Section 4?
That which, if that were struck, that
It'll be struck. Yeah.
Then you'd be okay, potentially. Okay, thank you.
Cliff was going to want to speak as well, but I'm going to save you for last if you don't mind. And James Monahan wishes to speak and is ambivalent about this one as well. We need a little box that says, not sure, ambivalent.
The 8 ball, I see him later.
You have the floor.
Yeah. I had intended to offer some opposition to the bill around Section 4, but I'm glad to hear from the Department of Energy that that section is not necessary. So the other thing, and I wouldn't have tested, I would have just stopped there, but I did want to offer some observation on Senator Waters. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Jim Monahan with the DuPont Group. I'm here today on behalf of Revision Energy with regard to the bill, and then for a number of other clients around the topic that Senator Waters raised around delay. Initially the question was, are things too slow at the Public Utilities Commission? And I think you're right, the industry is moving faster than the regulatory processes for that, and that's especially challenging in the energy storage space. The legislature has asked the Public Utilities Commission and the Department of Energy to undertake investigations to look at the issues surrounding compensation for energy storage, particularly utility scale storage. That was Senate Bill 715, which was enacted 4 years ago. Right. Nothing has happened. Initially, it started at the Public Utilities Commission, and then it was transferred to the Department of Energy. The Department of Energy got around to issuing an order of notice, and then stopped. There was supposed to be a stakeholder proceeding in July. That was postponed to August. That was postponed, and there's been no action on that proceeding. I think that I am working with developers who are looking at deploying large-scale utility scale. We like to call it large scale because it's not really utility scale in New Hampshire, but there is uncertainty around the financing of those projects when we don't know what the results of that investigation will be. And I honestly think in some measure the Public Utilities Commission is waiting for direction from the Department of Energy in that proceeding before they can proceed. We're reluctant to, potentially to go to the Commission and ask for the administrative rulemaking, establishing of the credits and things like that, because we know we'd probably just get stopped because they're waiting for the Department of Energy. So, I mean, and to be honest with you, this is not the first. I have talked to the leadership of the department about this. I don't think there's any ill intent. It's just they're overwhelmed with things. So I do think there would be support in the industry to bring the resources to the executive agencies to move forward, particularly when we see all the tax benefits that are coming to storage in New Hampshire, and we don't want to lose that opportunity. Capital has to make decisions about where they're going to invest, and if our regulatory structure isn't ready, they'll just go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Questions from the committee?
If I could.
Yes.
Thanks, Jim. You know, as I was kind of asking Josh earlier, if you and Josh and other interested parties think that the legislature could offer some guidance in terms of timeliness that the department would welcome, and if it is a question of maybe being able to bring in a consultant for this issue about the cost of it, bring something to us. But you know, I know everybody's trying, but Senate Bill 715, okay?
I know, yeah.
But there we are. So anyways.
Okay, no, I'm happy
you.
to talk to them about it, and
Thank
if
you.
there's a legislative solution, I'm sure the agency can work with us to get there.
Thank you for your testimony. Any further questions? Seeing none. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Cliff Bilo, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Good morning and Happy New Year, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I am Clifton Bilo, Chair of the Community Power Coalition in New Hampshire, and here to generally support the bill. It does some important cleanup, particularly changing homeowner to households, but also my written testimony does talk about advising with the caveat that we advise that Section 4 either be deleted or clarified or amended to clarify that the DOE could have a role in preparing an initial rule proposal for the PUC to consider and adopt. That might help move the process along. But along the lines of what Senator Waters was asking, I think you have on the second page of my written testimony, I kind of detail the concerns around that Section 4. And the last bullet on the second page points out that Section 4 is introduced would be in direct conflict with Senate Bill 391, which I think three of you are also co-sponsors of, which you haven't heard yet, which is a bill to have a comprehensive interconnection standard that incorporates storage and generation, distributed energy resources in general.
Yeah, we're going to strike it, so it's
okay.
Not an issue.
Yeah, so I won't go into more detail on that, except just to mention that just last year, you had amended the same statute through Senate Bill 166 that allows the commission to also approve tariffs as an alternative to rules or in addition to rules to enable battery storage. And in fact, there's two proceedings where that's an active issue. So we would like that. I think that may be one of the quickest routes to go ahead and enabling storage. One is Liberty has a pilot that was developed a few years ago, and they've proposed to extend the pilot to a bring your own device opportunity in conjunction with time of use rates with battery storage with or without net metering. And in the net metering docket itself, since the law changed effective in October, the coalition did propose in our testimony that the commission could go ahead and approve storage devices coupled with renewable generation as part of net metering. So that it's on the table in front of the commission now. I did want to just take this occasion, if I might, to just briefly update you on the coalition status. A year ago when I testified, we had 24 members. We've now grown to 53 members. 6 cities, 45 towns in Cheshire and Merrimack County. Merrimack County just joined. And we were just sort of, 2 years ago we were a vision. A year ago we were trying to trying to start up. But we did successfully launch 12 community power aggregations, including the city of Nashua, starting at the end of last April. And in our first 5 months of operation, we saved about 75,000 customers from those 12 communities, about $7 million compared to the utility rate. And we also accrued about $5 million in financial reserves. And we're really pleased to announce that starting February 1st, we will have the lowest rates in the state for residential and small businesses, 8.1 cents a kilowatt hour. And for larger businesses also that have monthly rates, their load weighted average of 8.1 cents per kilowatt hour. And we expect to cover all of our costs and continue to accrue reserves and continue to save ratepayers millions of dollars. So
This isn't a commercial, though.
this is not a commercial, but it's to let you know that the work that this committee and legislature has done is paying off. I feel like, hey, that's a good year's work, save $7 million. And we haven't figured it out since October, November, December as well. And so there's a handout that sort of provides some of that information, as well as a map of our membership and the communities that we'll be launching. Just wanted to let you know that there's progress there. The third page of my testimony is sort of a postscript, and it touches on the fact that the rules for net metering were also moved over to the Department of Energy, as well as some provisions about waivers and implementing utility-specific. And there's a little bit of a discussion here. I don't think the policies committee's ever really considered that. It was part of that trailer bill, one of hundreds of provisions that kind of came at the last minute. And the question I raise, which I think is something that you may want to think about over time, is just what is the role of the department versus the PUC, and are we, to what extent are we creating parallel regulatory authorities that have parallel authority over overlapping subject matter, in this case net metering, and what happens when they perhaps, there's been no conflict so far, but in theory, you could get a rule or order from the commission that is different than a rule or order from the department on the same subject matter, and how would that be resolved? It's just something that needs to be thought through. And I think to Senator Waters' point, I think there are opportunities to help expedite the appropriate integration of storage into the system, and happy to work with you on that.
So maybe the tie goes to the runner, whoever. Just kidding.
Okay.
Where did that come from? Yeah, it is actually. Well, I'm just thinking of the overlapping and whoever files first.
Right.
So whatever. Thank you for your testimony very much. Are there questions from the committee? Seeing none.
Okay,
Thank you. And we're going to close the hearing, but before I do that, Josh, do you have any other final statements that you want to, or are you all set? We're good. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are now adjourning on this particular bill, 388. But just make a note, we're going to strike section 4 in an amendment. So, and with that,
I think Innocent's in the hall.
yeah, is Senator Innocent outside?
I think so. He was a few minutes ago.
I'm gonna go back over there.
Okay.
I'll check.
You don't want to stay for
I'm
this
gonna be
one?
right back.
Okay.
I got another building.
All right.
He was talking.
Yeah, I saw him earlier. Thank you.
Oh, okay, I've got the ones for the last two bills.
Not right there. He was.
Julie, are you going to talk? Are you going to speak? Oh, okay.
Was there anything, there wasn't anything for 306? Okay, good enough. No. Thank you.
It's right there, just 5 minutes ago.
I saw him come in.
The 388, the one we just heard.
Oh, all right.
That was the 388 we just heard.
Yeah, so we'll have to come up, we'll send all of us a new copy for exec session on that next bill. Oh, thank you. Senator, welcome.
Good morning,
Good morning, Happy New Year.
and to you.
And ladies and gentlemen, we have Senator Dan Innes introducing this wonderful bill,
Depends on who you ask.
SB 541.
Good morning, Dan Innes, State Senator from Bradford, New Hampshire, District 7. Happy to be here this morning to introduce Senate Bill 541, entitled New Hampshire's Humane Pet Store Law. And the purpose of this bill is to sort of restrict puppy mills and their ability to sell puppies through pet stores. There are 7 states and 400 localities that presently prohibit the sale of dogs and cats in pet stores. And this particular bill is modeled after Maine's pet store law that was enacted in 2019. A number of towns have passed resolutions in support of this policy. And I'm not going to say too much more about it this morning. I think, no one wants to see an animal abused, and the purpose and the intent of this bill is to try to reduce some of those abuses by restricting where animals that come from puppy mills can actually be sold. I think the bill more or less speaks for itself, and there are people behind me who I know, probably a couple at least, who will testify on this bill. Let me add that I did speak with the Commissioner of Agriculture recently, and he has some concerns about the bill. I think there's some validity to those, and as I indicated to him and to others, let's talk these things through and move something forward that really improves the situation. And it's my sincere hope that we can do that. I'm happy to take any questions, but again, there are a lot of folks here behind me to testify on both sides of this issue, and I think that'll be a positive discussion for everyone.
Well, for the record, we didn't call each other, right?
No, we did not. No, I would have gone with the stripes had I known.
Right.
Oh, and Senator Waters as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
So yes,
Okay.
there's always one, isn't there, Senator Pearl? Yes. Again, happy to take any questions if there are any, but again, there are some very qualified
Senator
people
Waters, one
behind me.
question.
Yeah, I want to say thank you for bringing this forward, and I think one thing that's quite important in this bill, in Section 3, is that this might be a very good way for animal shelters to have partnerships.
It could be. I mean, yes, it could be.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for your testimony, Senator.
Thank you.
And seeing how we have the commish here. Commissioner Sean Jasper, not in support, but wishing to speak. And maybe there's some concerns that we can address. And so you have the floor, Commissioner.
Sorry about that. Good morning, Senators. For the record, I am Sean Jasper, Commissioner of the Department of Agriculture, Markets, and Foods, and I'll state right at the beginning that pet vending is the bane of my existence. And Senator Pearl knows that very well.
We're not talking about squirrels, are we?
No, not yet. So I'm going to provide you with some information, and I'll give you the reasons that we oppose this as a department, and then I'm going to go into a couple of personal concerns that I have. So we don't really know where these animals are coming from. We know where they're shipped into the state. And so we say puppy mills. We don't have any puppy mills in New Hampshire, but we also don't know specifically what's going on when these animals are coming into state. And I think when you hear about an animal shelter, you think back to the traditional definition that these were local organizations that were taking in local strays. This is certainly not the case anymore. There literally is no real difference between shelters and pet stores that we can determine, because so many animals are brought into state. One shelter brings in an average of 600 animals a year from out of state. And as a matter of fact, when you look at the total dogs brought into New Hampshire, pet stores brought in last year 1,317, and shelters brought in 1,997. No shelter brings in any cats. No pet stores bring in any cats, but there were 1,596 coming in from out of state. In the statute, the only difference is that shelters do not have to provide health certificates for animals that they take in state. So we don't really have any statistics on that. But I can tell you that, people want to say that, shelters do a much better job. Statistically, we issue a higher percentage of our administrative action to shelters than we do to pet stores. Yesterday, I took in, 2 days ago, I took in a $4,000 fine from one shelter. We don't ever just go to $4,000. This is a series of the same violations, inspection after inspection. Generally, the first is a warning, then we go to 100, then we up it. And so to get to $4,000 is extraordinary. But another fine letter is going out to another shelter this week for $3,200. So let's not get into this emotional idea that pet stores are bad and shelters are good. Because for us, there is no difference, but we do have more issues in the rescues, the shelters, because often the attitude is totally different. The attitude is, I'm doing good and I don't have time to follow the law, and I shouldn't have to. And people get very angry with us because they feel they're doing good, the law is not important. That's not what you've charged us to do. You have not said, well, if somebody convinces you they're doing good, they don't have to provide the proper care and conditions and all of those things. So I would ask you to consider that. The other part of this bill that is a great concern to me is, how is my department supposed to keep track of ownership? If, PetSmart is bought out by another corporation under this bill, they've changed ownership. I'm not sure how I would know that, but in that case, under this bill, they would no longer be eligible to hold a license. The other part is that this puts a restraint on the number of animals that these 94 pet stores can sell. They're tied to the 2023 number. Now, thankfully, we're going to have a database in place very soon. We're actually going to start testing with veterinarians this month. I'm very excited about that. So that won't be a hard number to track. But then what am I supposed to do? Well, you sold 100 animals last year. You went to 101, and now yank your license. That's unlike anything I'm aware of any place else in statute, but the ownership part of it is a real concern. I think adding the new definition of retail, we're assuming that retail is, I guess unless you're selling animals by wholesale, like Senator Pearl sells corn, and that would be a puppy mill, and we don't have any in here. So anytime anybody, and we're talking the very small breeders who are, if they're selling over 30 animals, are licensed by us. So they are retail, obviously. They have to have hours of operation. So our assumption is that anybody who, and by the way, the shelters are licensed as pet vendors. They do have hours of operation. They're all the same rules. Again, the only difference is what you have to have for a health certificate. So that's concerning. Now I'm going to go into my personal concern is that this is very unlike New Hampshire. It's a real restraint of trade. It takes away anyone's ability who has built up a business to transfer that ownership to anybody other than somebody within their family. So somebody who has put their life's work into something, now when they're ready to retire, and if they don't have a family member to take it over, they're done. I don't know that we do anything like that in New Hampshire. I don't know that we limit the numbers of what you can actually engage in commerce. So while there will be passionate testimony here, from an administrative part, I think we don't know. You can say that these animals are coming from puppy mills. We're wondering where, our primary animals being imported in New Hampshire are like Kentucky, Florida, and Texas, from the same places. How are these people in these towns getting that many animals where they can send 50 a month sometimes from the same location into New Hampshire? Are we the only people dealing with this? If you want to do anything to the puppy mill business, just say New Hampshire is not going to be the place to send your animals into. Just don't allow the import of animals at all. I mean, that's the way to get to the problem, because right now this is, not what it appears on the surface. I'll be glad to take any questions.
Chair has a question first, if you don't mind. So Senator Ennis had mentioned that you two had a discussion, and there might be some type of resolve that we could at least move forward with something.
Well, the senator and I had that conversation just before the hearing. And the conversation on my part was, I really wish you had contacted me. And so, as I said, I think there are things perhaps that can be done, but I think they should be applying to everybody who's doing the same thing. I don't think because somebody has decided to call themselves a shelter, but when you look at the facts, there's no difference. And as a matter, and I think there should be a concern that we're not issuing $4,000 fines to traditional pet stores. The fines are going to the shelters. Now, I will say one company neglected to get their license in on time. Each store got a pretty substantial fine, and they have a number of stores. But that was not for conditions. What we're issuing these shelter fines for is conditions and record keeping. It's both, and record keeping is very important, where the animal has come from, making sure that when they are bringing them in, that the health certificates are filled out correctly. But we are not seeing anything administratively that would favor one type of business over another.
Senator Pearl, and then Senator Waters.
Thank you, Commissioner, for coming in today. I probably could give you about 15 questions, but I'll try to keep it down to 2 or 3 here. So as I'm looking at this bill, where it would redefine a pet vendor as a retail pet store. How many pet vendors are there in the state of New Hampshire?
Well, according to the numbers, that does vary. I'm looking at somewhere around 140 here, but that's not an exact number because I don't think this is including the small breeders who are breeding specialty animals, and they may be going over 30. That's the one number I don't have. I think there may be 200 and some odd licensees, but I can get you that number if you want it. I can tell you that there are at least 150. But
so by this statute, that would make all of those pet vendors retail pet stores, correct?
Except for those who were shelters. Yeah, everybody else, including those small people who are licensed because they do breed over 30 or more, yeah, they would all be retail.
So that would impact many of our in-state breeders
Absolutely.
significantly.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. It doesn't solve the issue of puppy mills in other states.
Follow-up?
Follow-up so to me, this creates a conflict, because if you've got a retail pet vendor that is also an animal shelter facility, so how can they be exempt but required to, it would make them by definition a retail pet store, but they're also an animal shelter facility. Just, to me, that creates a conflict.
You will be carving out an exception, saying if somebody forms their business in a certain way, then they get this exemption and they can grow and they can continue, whereas eventually all the other ones are likely to die out, whether that's 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, 100 years. We have no way of knowing.
I'll ask one more, and then I'll let Senator Waters go. So you touched on another spot that sort of gives me some heartburn with this bill. Is it's a very anti-business bill, a very anti-New Hampshire business bill, and you and I guess, come from the same background on that of animal agriculture, that we know and understand that these businesses can be multi-generational at times, and I'm not necessarily sure the retail pet stores are, but again, this is a very broad net that it casts. And so you sort of touched on this, about the amount of that it would devalue a business, and I was going to ask you about the enforceability part. I think you sort of indicated that you wouldn't be able to, but as I look at this, is this going to create a real nightmare for the department to try and understand and bring enforcement to this?
We believe that it will, and certainly the state vet and the assistant state vet are as concerned about this as we are, as I am, excuse me, and we're just not sure how we would comply with what you're asking us to, because it's I'm not sure of anything else where you delve into the ownership, where the ownership is a particular criteria for licensure. And I just don't know how we do that.
And thank you for providing those numbers of imports, because that was a question I was going to ask, so thank you.
Senator Waters for the question.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just to say, as an aside, I think we do have the ownership issue when it comes to commercial fishing license transfer, but that's not your department.
Yeah. I think that's federal as well.
Anyhow, I have one informational question. You said something like 1,997 animals come into shelters. Are those from out of state or those in state?
No, those are all out of state. I gave you out of state numbers. Okay. We don't know how many are from in-state, because for some reason, and apparently it's been in statute for decades, in-state animals were carved out from shelters.
And another question, if I may. So you mentioned that the possibility of saying no out-of-state animals coming in, wouldn't that violate the Interstate Commerce Clause?
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. Well, I don't know. You can't bring any pigs or poultry into California unless you meet certain criteria, so I guess you could model it after the California law on pigs and poultry and not violate interstate commerce.
We're not going to eat these animals, though.
Well, no, but you could talk about but you could talk about the growing requirements. They couldn't come from puppy mills. They had to be certified that these were strays that were picked up and were truly rescues. I mean, you could certainly do that.
Yeah. So my last
maybe
question,
that's the compromise,
Mr. Chair, is that Senator Innes mentioned Maine, 2014, I think he said. Have you had any discussion with Maine about how they did their bill to ban this?
I wasn't aware that they had. No.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe we'll find out from the advocates. I'm curious if they found a way to manage it. They did find a way to manage it. But
question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. And we do have cat lovers in the audience as well. And you said something, if I heard correctly, the shelters aren't taking in cats?
No, I initially said that backwards.
Okay.
There are no imports of cats into pets, the traditional pet vendors.
Oh,
All the cats are imported by the shelters.
Do you have that number?
I do.
I missed that,
So
sorry.
cats coming into the shelters, rescues is,
Dave, you want your phone too? Okay,
it,
I'm gonna take a picture of myself.
1,596 cats were brought into the shelters rescues.
And the 1,997 number was dogs or all aggregate?
Dogs was 1,997.
Thank you.
And I will say that the certificates of veterinary inspections, dogs to shelters was 367, cats to shelters 100. And so those were, probably shouldn't have even given you those numbers, but I believe those are the ones that do require inspection, and those were probably in-state animals.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you, Commissioner, we appreciate your time.
Thank you, and if you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of me, particularly Senator Pearl.
It's a longer walk for you now, though.
Not yet.
Oh, you haven't moved yet?
No, and it looks like we probably won't until perhaps end of April.
All right, so still a short walk.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, Kurt, you didn't support, don't oppose, didn't say you want to speak or don't want to speak, so what is it?
You want to speak and I need support, and I apologize for not checking the line.
Okay. Kurt from the Humane Society in support and wishes to speak.
Kurt Ehrenberg, the Humane Society of the United States. I guess at first I'd want to say that notwithstanding all the problems the Department of Agriculture may or may not have dealing with animals in the state, this bill deals with retail, meaning pets that are bought and sold through a broker, not directly from a breeder. So, and it does not involve shelters. So most of that, I believe, was irrelevant to the bill. Most of that testimony prior to mine was irrelevant to what we're dealing with here today. And I hope that others will stick to what is written in the bill and not making things up. This bill, and I'm going to read my testimony at this point. On behalf of the Humane Society of the United States and our New Hampshire supporters, I'm here in support of SB 541. This common sense, reasonable bill will stop the sale of puppies and kittens in additional pet stores while allowing the handful of pet stores currently selling these animals in retail situations to do so. Only 5 pet stores in New Hampshire sell puppies, and it is in the best interest of animals and consumers to make sure no additional stores can do so. We do not want to be the only state in the region to open more puppy-selling pet stores. New York recently stopped all of its pet stores from selling puppies. And Vermont and Massachusetts are seriously considering legislation this year. SB 541 is not based on, but is similar to Maine's popular law that was enacted in 2019 and has stopped pet stores from selling these puppies. And there is support on the local level for this policy, as several New Hampshire communities have already enacted resolutions against the sale of puppies and kittens in pet stores in favor of state action like this. Puppy-selling pet stores pose numerous unique issues for animals and consumers, including supporting cruel puppy mills that no New Hampshire consumer would knowingly support, selling sick puppies, utilizing misleading sale tactics, and engaging in predatory puppy financing practices These are not characteristics I would describe for any reasonable breeder that people would be buying dogs from in New Hampshire. That includes hunting dogs, that you may hear about later. Nobody buys hunting dogs in pet stores that I know of. I don't probably think anyone in this room has heard of that. New Hampshire, people buying their hunting dogs in pet stores. Basically, the whole system is broken. It's also unnecessary because no resident needs a pet store to find the dog or cat of their choice. New Hampshire and surrounding states have a wide range of puppies available directly from responsible breeders, as well as a large network of shelters and rescues not classified as retail. That's why there are so few pet stores selling puppies already. New Hampshire can keep bad actors from moving to our state while supporting the vast majority of stores that don't sell puppies. The massive $136 billion retail pet industry is dominated by stores that focus on selling pet food and other products and offering in-demand services like grooming and training. Rather than selling puppies, the most successful pet stores partner with local shelters and rescues to save lives and drive more businesses to their stores. Last, I want to note that with 7 state laws and nearly 500 local laws across the nation, we are confident this policy works as intended. And the intention, again, is to reduce cruelty, pain, and suffering for countless animals who are manufactured in puppy mills across this country and now taken to stores like the Puppy Palace, which I think we may hear about later, in Manchester. So I urge you to support Senate Bill 541, and I am available for questions.
Thank you, Kurt. I guess I have one question myself, and then I'll open it up to, I guess, to my other committee members, since there's only 2 of us now. Is this bill going to stop puppy mill puppies from coming in through shelters?
I don't know the answer to that. This bill does not affect shelters.
Correct.
So I would say that is an entirely separate issue. I would love to discuss it with you and perhaps talk about other legislative remedies that could be put in place to make sure shelters are responsible.
Well, my concern is that we would be limiting the retail sale, and I have a question about that as well, whether a fee for adoption could be considered a retail sale. I'm going to have to look into that further because I don't know the answer myself.
Well, if I could, I mean, we would certainly be.
If you have a thought on that, please share.
Well, we would be open to any reasonable amendment that would make sure that this would satisfy that that concern.
I mean, my understanding is this bill is to prevent puppy mill puppies from coming into New Hampshire, and I can see that there's a large area, considering that the majority of the dogs that are imported are coming in through shelters, that we aren't addressing the concern where
that may be, but I don't want to compare apples and oranges here. You have a retail system, then you have the other system.
Understood, but again,
this deals with retail.
The reason we would be looking to put restrictions on retail sales was to prevent this practice from occurring, not the,
It may not be a holistic approach in this bill. I agree with that.
Thank you. Any questions from you? I don't see anybody else, so I guess we're good. Thank you, Kurt.
Thank you.
Always appreciate it. Oh, let's see here. My apologies. I forgot I had to manage here. How about Stacy Ober? Stacy opposes. Ober, O-B-E-R, yes. Sorry. I'll try to enunciate.
Good morning. Stacy Ober, hardest 4-letter word. My husband didn't let me know that when I took his name. O-B-E-R. Stacy Ober, I'm the New England Manager of Government Relations for the American Kennel Club, and I'm here to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 541. I want to just acknowledge, because I cover New England, I will respond to the statement made earlier that Vermont and Massachusetts are seriously considering this same legislation. This bill was just newly introduced yesterday for the first time in Vermont. Came in my tracking this morning. And I've been in this role for 5 years. The bill has been refiled multiple times in Massachusetts, and it has never successfully made it out of committee. So for the record, I just wanted to give you that detail. The American Kennel Club is a 140-year-old nonprofit, and we are recognized as experts in canine health, breeding, training, and responsible dog ownership. We represent more than 5,000 clubs across the country, including 13 here in New Hampshire. What people don't know is that the American Kennel Club has a robust inspection and investigation program to enforce our care and condition standards with anyone who registers litters with us across the country. Just from a historical standpoint, in looking at this bill, I think it's important to acknowledge that here in New Hampshire in 2019, the legislature removed the legal distinction between those who sell animals, dealers and pet stores, and those who produce dogs and cats, the breeders. And we're now regulated under the one license that the commissioner noted as the pet vendor license. And that language and framework was worked tirelessly by both your Senate president and also the vice chair who was serving in the House at the time. The goal of Senate Bill 541 looks as though it's designed to reduce the sale of cats and dogs in New Hampshire. I did search for a definition of retail. I'm grateful for the commissioner providing his interpretation. Breeders sell puppies to family members through private sale. They never sell dogs wholesale. And I think that's probably a helpful definition or understanding or interpretation of the bill, and why I can share with you that the bill would inappropriately categorize licensed pet vendors with a physical facility as a retail pet store. It's not uncommon for local breeders to have a physical kennel on their property. And so in our interpretation of the bill, we would absolutely be swept up into this new definition that would cap breeders and pet vendor shops to the future transfer of dogs and cats to their 2023 levels. I think all of us can acknowledge we love our dogs. Americans love their dogs, and the demand for dogs exceeds supply basically every year. I have in my testimony reference to the American Veterinary Medical Association. They did a source book report in 2022, for instance, and reported that just 25% of the public gets their new dog from a breeder. Our wait lists, AKC breeder wait list for a puppy is on average 2 to 3 years. And I wanted to note that frequently people are eager when they've decided they want a puppy, want a dog, and they're unwilling to wait. And what we know is that if they can't go in person to meet a dog and choose a dog that fits their family, they go online. And so what I've added to my testimony is a December 2022 Better Business Bureau report where they have been tracking since 2017 the number of puppy scams online when consumers go online to purchase a pet. And on average, 25% of all online scams are pet scams. It describes in the article how this is done, the amount of money that's lost. This number bumped up, for instance, during COVID. And I think it's problematic because this bill, if it were enacted, would certainly decrease the availability to go to licensed, regulated pet vendors in New Hampshire to acquire a pet. This is the opposite of what the Humane Society of the United States claims in a fact sheet that I found in one of my folders around the puppy mill con, saying don't be duped by bad breeders. And it gives all of the things that you should look for, which is to meet, that the seller will meet you in person. They often require a buyer application. They allow you to visit their facility and see all available puppies and their parents. show you where the puppies and parents spend their time, provide the name and number of their veterinarian, provide health and screening reports for puppies and parents. All of these guarantees are what's in the puppy vendor license framework that the commissioner acknowledged they are assiduously trying to implement still from 2019 when those provisions and consumer protections were put in place. Furthermore, we know that shelter pets can present with health challenges and also behavioral challenges, and they're not always the right fit for every family. The last thing that I wanted to offer is if Senate Bill 541 were to pass, it would force New Hampshire families to get their pet from out-of-state vendors, sight unseen, which I said is the opposite of what responsible pet ownership and advocacy and consumer protections really want to see happen to make certain that people aren't being duped. New Hampshire does have strong laws to prevent and prosecute animal neglect and cruelty. It has consumer protections that are in place here when you obtain a pet from a licensed pet vendor. And if there are problems in other states with animal neglect or cruelty, the framework is to work with the federal government, the USDA, and those state governments to enforce humane care and condition standards. If there are conditions and a breeder is affiliated with the AKC, complaints can be made to our compliance department where they'll go in and inspect. If it's a failure on the care and conditions standards, they get reported to local officials. So I just wanted to kind of give a 60,000-foot view. So from our standpoint, AKC would like to encourage the committee to vote Senate 541 inexpedient to legislate, and I am available for any questions that you might have.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions from the committee? Seeing none?
Are there copies of the testimonies for me? I don't have.
I brought 10 copies of my written, and I also submitted it through email. I brought 10 copies this morning with me. No, it's the AKC. Oh, okay.
Thank you for your testimony.
All set. Thank you very much.
How are you doing, man? Good. Elizabeth, boy, I'm going to butcher your last name. Steranok?
Yeah, that's how I say it.
All right. I guess I didn't butcher it.
That's all that matters, right?
Okay. This is a support.
Okay.
How many more we got?
Okay. Thank you. Maybe like a dozen.
Go ahead and start when you're ready.
Hi, I'm Ellie, and I don't belong to any organization, but I worked at one of the 5 pet stores that has been linked to Puppy Mills in New Hampshire, the Puppy Palace in Manchester. When it first opened last year, I worked there from May 7th to May 19th as a kennel attendant. And I had just worked at an animal shelter, so I kind of I knew more about dogs than I ever had when I started working there, and it was pretty easy to tell that things were not being done right there. So everything when the first dogs got there seemed totally fine, but within 3 days, more than half of them, probably 75% of them, there were 28 dogs that got there, and more than half of those dogs had, they had roundworms, hookworms, giardia, and coccidia are the ones I remember off the top of my head. And they were still being sold. They were being given light antibiotics, and they were still being sold. So I got the chance to talk to a lot of people who are involved in the business as a whole. The franchise owner came many times, and he told me that they were hoping to open a lot of more stores in New Hampshire, including stores in Portsmouth, because they thought they would get a lot of business there. So he said in his own words that he wanted to open more stores so he could be the Amazon of puppy sales, because they really didn't see the dogs as animals or living beings. They saw them as how much money can we make off each dog and how fast can we get them out the door so we can get another dog in here. So while I was there, I did not see any dogs die, but I there was one dog who went to an emergency vet because he was completely non-responsive. And when he got there, they said he was an hour away from being dead. And I quit a few days later, and then maybe a little bit less than 3 weeks after I quit, a dog did die at that store. So I know that this bill would not close down the existing pet stores, but it would stop this business from expanding in New Hampshire. And I definitely think that unless there's legislature or stricter rules about this, these places will keep expanding and expanding. And then I also wanted to respond to a couple of things that were said earlier. For example, the AKC having very high standards and doing many inspections. I know this isn't true of all places or all pet stores even, I'm sure, but the store I worked at, the franchise owner and the manager both talked about how they had really never been, like, they could go years without having any of their facilities inspected by anyone. And I also have seen pictures and videos of the puppy mills that are inspected by the AKC and the USDA, and you would not think they would be passing any inspections. And then another thing is that if the demand for puppies always exceeds supply, then we wouldn't have any animals in the animal shelters. Like there would be no stray animals, which there are not as many as other states, but that's just untrue. If you want a dog in New Hampshire, you're able to get one. And a lot of the people who came into the store I worked at in particular said that their kids wanted a dog that specific day, and they knew that at a shelter or like a well-regulated ethical breeder, they would have to wait, or they would say that they didn't think they could meet the shelter's like expectations. But if a bill like this were to pass, then they would turn to shelters, and they would see that the application processes really aren't as strict as they think. Like they don't want you to necessarily have a fenced-in yard. They just want to know that the dog is going to be with you at your house or with your family. So yeah, I don't belong to any organization, but I definitely have some personal experience with it, and I hope that if this bill doesn't pass, then I hope that a similar one or an amended one can definitely be passed in the near future.
You did a really good job. Thank you very much, and you spoke from your heart, and appreciate that. When the commissioner, were you here when the commissioner was talking?
About
when he testified?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Have you worked in a shelter itself?
Yes.
Yes, and you heard that some of the shelters are really,
Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, I'm sure, and I've heard of like shelters kind of masquerading as shelters. I haven't heard of that happening in New Hampshire, but all the shelters in New Hampshire that I know of are like the dogs there were getting enrichment toys 3 times a day, and they might be coming from out of state, but the difference is they're not being born so that they can be shipped out of state and sold to make money. They're stray animals from out of state that are being brought by rescues to New Hampshire because they know that they can find a home here because we have less stray animals and more, like we have better conditions for animals here.
So in a perfect world, if this bill didn't pass, what kind of rules do you think we should do?
I would personally, I think that like some kind of other inspection or organization, like going to the facilities and making sure that things are like as they're being told, because like I said, I don't think before I worked at the Puppy Palace, in fact, I did think that AKC registered and USDA inspected. I did think that meant like, okay, you're getting a healthy dog, but I don't think that anymore. So I would say more of like physically going and seeing like what the space is like what they're eating, asking questions about what they're cared for, stuff like that.
So when you saw how some of these animals were treated, did you speak up?
Yes, and I only worked there for 2 weeks, but I got into it like probably starting on my first day. I even said in my job interview, I said like that I had just worked at an animal shelter, and I was hoping that we could like incorporate some of the ideas that they had there. And my manager seemed like totally on board and excited, but I complained about how many times a day they were being fed, what they were drinking out of. I complained about the vet not actually being a vet. He was a vet tech, the size of the cages, how much exercise they got, and it all just rolled right over their heads. So I doubt they're doing things any differently now.
So you would think more inspections would be a
Yeah,
good
and
idea.
not by like, I don't know who would do it, but not just by the AKC or the USGA.
Okay. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Taylor? Is it Lively?
Lavelli, but close.
Of course. Lively Lavelli.
I'll try to be lively today. Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee, for letting me speak about Senate Bill 541 today. My name is Taylor Lavelli, and I am representing the Pet Advocacy Network. The Pet Advocacy Network is the nation's largest pet trade association. So we represent members across the country, including in New Hampshire. So I am here today on behalf of the Pet Advocacy Network to request that you all vote no on Senate Bill 541. We know from our members and from legislation that pet stores are the most highly regulated and transparent source where individuals can obtain an animal. Because of that, we have seen pet sale bans across the nation and the negative effects they've had. For instance, California enacted a pet sale ban in 2019. And since then, veterinarians reported that they saw a large increase in sick animals and that puppy scams had increased by 350%. I do know that the bill currently has a grandfather clause that protects pet stores that are currently in business. However, it prohibits their ability to expand, relocate, or transfer ownership, and also obviously stops new responsible business owners from opening a store. We also, like places in Oregon, have seen pet store or grandfather clauses removed eventually after the bill has passed. So we definitely agree that stopping bad actors in the pet community is very important. We just think that there's other ways to do so that are much more effective than pet sale bans. Some examples, which I don't think we've heard a lot today, would be prohibiting roadside sale of puppies or increasing licensing fees so we can do more inspections. You could also have sourcing restrictions, making sure that these pet stores are only purchasing animals from USDA licensed breeders. Again, we do know that New Hampshire does already regulate pet stores in some ways. So New Hampshire requires pet stores to offer a 14-day warranty on these animals. So if someone takes the dog they purchased to the vet and something's found wrong with the animal, they can return the animal for a full refund or exchange the animal. They also cannot sell kittens and puppies that are under 8 weeks old. They have to be licensed, clean, and sanitary, and they also must vaccinate dogs and cats that are 3 months old or older for rabies. We do know that we are very in favor of people adopting animals from shelters if that's something they want to do, but this isn't a choice for all families. Pet Advocacy Network does hope to protect pet choice because some families have issues like allergies where they need a specific breed of dog and they're not able to adopt what's currently in the shelter. Some people want to know the full medical history and veterinary records of their animal, which is something pet stores offer. And they also may want to just adopt a purebred dog and have that guaranteed through a purchase at a pet store. Again, bans are hurting families, pets, and small businesses, but we really welcome the opportunity to work with you all on legislation that can help address these bad actors because they are there. We just know that there's a lot better ways to do so than pet sale bans. So we welcome collaboration with however you move forward. I did email you all testimony, and there is some today, so you have my contact information. I'm happy to talk to you after the hearing as well. And yes, I thank you for the opportunity to speak with you all, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
You killed me on the 14-day return policy. That poor dog.
Yeah.
But, you know, again, if this bill didn't see the light of day after this, eliminating roadsides, increasing licensing fees for more inspections, as our previous person who testified said, you know, she would like to see more inspections.
Mm-hmm. And we've worked with states like Connecticut and Pennsylvania to do that. We've recently helped overhaul dog law in Pennsylvania because they had proposed a ban, and we had helped them go through different avenues that actually were stopping puppy mills. Because again, this bill is just likely to increase unregulated markets and bad actors in the community.
Right, and of course, being caged all day long, you definitely want these animals to be exercised, but there's maybe having some type of registry saying that they've been taken out of the cage and walked, and
yes,
and some sort of certifying that, because that is a cruel thing.
Yes, of course. And there's also, you know, we can get more specific with type of sanitation laws, things like that in the cages as well.
Yeah, so the department would need more revenue to make sure that these inspections happen. So how do we get there from here? Okay, any other questions from the Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming in today and testifying.
Mm-hmm.
So you've heard my concern. It sounds like you have some experience in other states being more of a widespread advocacy network. How are other states addressing the concern of, you know, these puppy mill puppies coming in through the rescue system? Even if we ban the retail sale, it would still leave that avenue open. Do you have any experience or any thoughts on how other states have handled that side of it?
So I think, first of all, I'll speak, and my colleague Alyssa Miller-Hurley's here too, who may have worked on some legislation. I have not directly worked on that at this point. I do know that the first step is to not ban the pet stores, because again, that's going to create more avenues for puppy mills to sell on vendors like Craigslist. But how we've actually stopped that directly through legislation. Alyssa, did you have anything you want to add?
She can come up if you, is that okay, Mr. Chair?
Did she
I'll
already
make room.
testify?
No, she's not.
And your name is?
Alyssa Miller-Hurley, with the Pet Advocacy
It says
Network.
checked off as she spoke. You did a boo-boo.
I did? No, she said she wasn't speaking.
I did a boo-boo. All right, go ahead. Welcome.
Yeah, so thank you so much. And so as Taylor mentioned, in Pennsylvania, one of the ways that we were able to help address this was by creating standards that anyone who was dealing with animals had to adhere to. So in addition to creating additional regulations for sourcing restrictions on what pet stores had to look for when working with breeders from out of state, we also worked to increase the regulations and really put things in writing for what shelters had to adhere to. And we had worked with them to create a different classification. So really separating out what's a kennel, what's a pet store, what is a shelter, and making sure that in writing, where there hadn't been before, that there was regulations for what kind of sanitation had to happen, what kind of record keeping had to happen for any dogs coming in state. Previously, there really hadn't been much record keeping, including not knowing where the dogs were coming from or how many were coming into Pennsylvania, and increasing the inspections that had to happen, including licensing, making sure that licenses were up to date. And one of the ways that we were able to work with the legislature to increase the funds, to really increase the number of dog wardens and the folks to inspect this, was increasing the licensing fees that both shelters, kennels, and stores had to adhere to, and that owners had to pay. We didn't increase them too much. We didn't want to pass the cost too much on to Pennsylvania residents, but we did have some marginal increases in the licensing fees, because again, all that was then going to greater staff up the folks in the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture and the dog wardens, the folks that really are going town to town and place to place to inspect these facilities, whether or not they were a shelter, a rescue, or a pet store or a kennel. And we even, I can get into really granular because we even then split it down to the number of dogs and making sure that we are getting into really the nitty-gritty, because there was a real lack of clarity as to what qualifies as a kennel, what qualifies as a shelter, and then what kind of regulations they had to adhere to.
Although, excuse me. One of the things that you talked about was banning roadside sales. And I can understand and I can see how that could, anything that we do like this could push people more in that direction. How are other states handling that?
In Connecticut, we've worked to ban the sale of, roadside sales and I will be the first to admit, it's very hard to do something like that because you're having to really send people at the border between different states. But they've increased fines. They've increased the ability for, I don't want to say patrolling is the wrong word, but they've increased fines and they've increased the ability for the people that are in charge of animal inspections, that are in charge of really overseeing animal cruelty, to have greater authority. So when they come across something like that, whether it's through social media, whether it's through a backpage ad, or whether it's through a concerned citizen who sees that on the side of the road, giving them some greater authority to be able to go in and either confiscate the animals, to issue fines, to issue tickets, and then to get them tracked in a way where we know who they are. So if they come back into Connecticut, we're able to really crack down on it. And again, that was part of a bill that was done in place of an overarching ban.
If you get examples of that type of legislation, please feel free to forward it to the committee. It'd be good for us to see, just so we can have that kind of in our head when we're looking through these.
Yeah, we'd be happy. We can forward, be happy to send you stuff from Pennsylvania. And again, that just passed and was signed. It was something we were really happy to work with the committee on. And that was what we advocate for, which is bringing everyone in the pet care community to the table. We can also happily send you information from Colorado. Colorado instituted a law where they have PACFA, and PACFA is the board that oversees animal regulations and standards of care within the state of Colorado. But one of the laws they have is that any pet store that's operating and anyone that's operating that works to bring animals in has to get from either a breeder or a source that adheres to the same regulations or meets the same standards within Colorado and meets those PACFA standards. So if you have store A that's working with a breeder in Kentucky, that breeder has to be able to meet the standards set within the state of Colorado in order for store A to be able to continue to work with them.
We're certainly seeing standards like that occurring in the food industry, where if we're going to ship into a broker who's going to send into a, California is one, lead examples, we have to certify that we're meeting those requirements. So I certainly do know that those things do occur. So.
Yeah, and they also created a whole separate board to oversee it because they recognize that there is a lot of pressure and there is a lot of onus that's put on something like the Department of Agriculture. And so by creating a separate board that oversees it, it also allowed the Department of Agriculture to not feel either as stressed and be able to allocate the proper resources for where things actually needed to go.
It seems to me like that may be a better direction of solving this problem.
That would definitely be
thank
something
you.
we'd be
Appreciate
happy to
the-
work with you on, and
appreciate
we
the
can
input.
send you that stuff.
So somebody has 3 or 4 cats, and she can no longer take care of them.
Yes.
And she transfers them to a neighbor. Is that considered a roadside transfer, or does that fall under that category of roadside sale? Or?
No, that would not fall into it. A typical roadside sale would look like, and unfortunately we've seen this happen in places that have instituted bans. It typically looks like someone coming in from out of state with an entire litter or several litters of animals, setting something up at a rest stop, at a gas station, at a private property, and sending that information out and then selling those animals.
That's really happening, huh?
Unfortunately, I could say I lived in Florida, and unfortunately I used to see a lot of that in North Florida, where you would be driving down the road and you'd see someone with just, a little chicken coop wire fence and a dozen or so more animals that they would say, you know, blue nose pitty is for sale, and you know, you don't know if they were bred there, you don't know where they came from. And so regulations that can cut down on things like that, that working then with the AKC, who does have responsible breeders, and someone like that isn't a responsible breeder, would be the way to cut
so
down.
basically, you're falling in line with our previous speaker that you need some more inspections, more regulations in such a way that these animals are cared for in a more meaningful way. And you have legislation that we can look at.
Yes, we do. We're definitely, I think one of the misconceptions about the pet industry is that we aren't in favor of regulation, and that's definitely not it. People that are in this, and the reason why we're in this is because we love animals, and we want to make sure they're getting the highest standard of care and going to families who love them. And so we are in favor of working with the legislatures across the country and for regulation.
May I throw in one more thought?
One more.
All right. Is there any states that are addressing this situation? Because it almost becomes a buyer beware situation of educating the general public of, listen, this is a really bad idea to go buy a puppy at a rest area on I-95. Is there any states that are addressing an educational component like this, you know, maybe a public service announcement or something along that line that you're aware of?
They're in majority of the states that we've worked with, and again, I can point to Colorado because they, you know, that was really some great legislation, but even in places like Pennsylvania and Connecticut, they will tell folks and give people the information and say, here's what you should look for. Here are trusted sources. They'll point to folks like the AKC and they'll say, here's where you can go to find local chapters within your state. They'll have resources on often, you know, the Department of Agriculture or whomever oversees that specific part of the industry on what you should look for, what kinds of questions you should ask, and what to be what to kind of watch out for in scams, especially as we've seen the rise of internet scams. And unfortunately, we're not seeing as much media coverage as we think should happen, because you really have to dig into it to find the stories of when we're seeing it. And when you do read about it, it's really horrible stories of folks just getting scammed out of like $7,000 and never having a dog never show up, having the wrong breed. In one instance, we saw someone who thought they were getting a Pomeranian. They took it to the vet. It ended up being a long-haired ferret.
Oh my.
Yeah, but you know, they had no idea. And then there's also, you know, someone thought they were getting one breed of dog, and when it kept growing, they found out it was completely different. Yeah.
That's not okay. Well, thank you very much for your testimony. Senator Waters with a question first.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So actually, it's kind of a follow-up and some advice. That I do think that after you've heard, you know, what we heard from the Commissioner Jasper, is not just him, but there is a concern in all of our agencies about how we can enforce regulations, given the scale of our government, which is, you know, Colorado I know well. I know our legislators out there, and they have a capacity to find funding sources to do rather extensive regulation and enforcement. I think what will work here, and from what I hear from Senator Pearl, is that we take a consumer protection approach and require that there be definitions and information and so on that provide consistency not only to the suppliers but also consistency to people who want to get animals, and they'll know that they have some assurance. And in saying that, I think that if you can help us, that things that are, you know, again, I think that approach works well here, consumer protection, but also that would not require heavy reporting and enforcement on both the breeders and the, you know, pet stores and everybody else, but also particularly on our agencies. I think there's a way forward on this, but I think it's going to be through consumer protection side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And in California, I will note, they had some great consumer protections for you know, working with pet stores, and then for owners, even where, like, if your animal was sick, the pet store would reimburse you or pay for veterinary cost, and it wouldn't stop just at 14 days. It would continue for a number of years. And so we'd be happy to also provide you with some of the examples of consumer protection laws that have been specifically written for these instances.
And can I ask one question to follow up on what the commissioner was talking, I'm talking a little bit out there as well, his suggestion about, would there be a way for the out-of-state suppliers to have them document whether or not an animal was in fact a stray that had been a rescue, as opposed to, as he mentioned, we're getting 50 animals a week from some of these places, and that's a whole lot of rescuing.
Yeah.
So anyways, I just don't think that, is that practicable?
I think it is. They were part of what was included in Pennsylvania's law was ways that, was greater record keeping on the part of shelters, and that included where the animals were coming from and also what kind of health concerns or records may have been attached to them. A lot of the animals that are coming in from New Hampshire or from, to other states, many of them come from the South and the Southeast, and they're coming from overcrowded shelters. And so one of the ways to greater protect consumers and to greater also allow tracking in New Hampshire would be to require that any animal coming into a shelter that's being transferred from one, let's say in South Carolina, must provide that health record and an up-to-date health record along with each and every animal.
So we can offload the expense on the other states. This is the New Hampshire way. Good.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
testimony.
Thanks so
Please,
much. Yeah.
We'll look forward to that information too. We really
Thank you so
appreciate
much.
that. And if you have public service announcements, please send those as well. 30-second spots, please.
Yeah, absolutely.
With that, I'm going to ask Joan O'Brien. Are you here with anybody else, Joan? That's going to testify? Would you both come up? And you are? We're separate. Oh, you're separate, okay. They're going to kick me out of the room in a little bit, so I want to give everybody a fair shot. Okay. For some reason, my committee gets kicked out at a certain point.
That's because my next committee uses this at 1.
Yeah. Well,
Because they had to air it out.
they got,
So, my name's Joan O'Brien. I'm from Amherst. And I am on the board of directors for the New Hampshire Animal Rights League, but I'm here today just speaking for myself. And I really appreciate, I can tell how much all of you care about the dogs and this issue.
And cats.
And it's almost like and the cats. Cats are less of a problem in this state.
We've got a big cat lover in the audience, and I just want to make sure she knows we care about cats.
We all love cats. So I appreciate how the conversation has pivoted to trying to solve the whole big problem of, unhealthy animals coming into this state. But what we have in front of us is something that will solve one piece. We've got a record of this working in seven other states. As Senator Innes mentioned when he introduced it, 400 municipalities have also passed ordinances against selling dogs in stores. So we have something that could work, and it's a piece of the puzzle. It won't solve the whole problem, but let's get this done. I'd like to just reiterate that we're talking about 5 stores that are going to be affected by this, and that the bill basically maintains the status quo. So really nothing's going to change for those stores or for anybody else, including the Department of Agriculture. Things are going to be the same tomorrow as they are today. In regard to concerns about where the market will shift if you can't buy a dog in a store, a lot of that business will be redirected to our responsible New Hampshire breeders. I've spoken to many people who've gone to the stores. They found out they were lied to about the origins of a dog, so they went to a local breeder and got a dog. Or there was even a woman who, unfortunately, her dog was at the puppy palace. She was going to take him home. He died there because he didn't receive proper veterinary care. She went off to a local New Hampshire breeder and got a different dog for her family. So it's not necessarily going to be that they run online. And in fact, we have data to show that in these states where the laws have passed ending the retail sale of dogs, the large-scale commercial breeders that were supplying them have shrunk in size by about 1/3, and the consumer protection problems subsequently go away, And rather than shifting the demand to the online sales or to the parking lots we were discussing, the market is being shifted towards responsible breeders and shelters. And there's people even getting into the business of responsible small-scale breeding. So there could be other opportunities. There's an organization called the Functional Dog Collaborative here in New Hampshire that is doing work in this area. I think that the ladies from the Pet Store Advocacy Network had some great suggestions for solving problems. I do want to say that with the puppy lemon law, that you can return the dog after 14 days, that doesn't help most people because they don't want to give up the dog. Even if it's sick, they don't want to exchange it. So they just want to make the dog healthy. So just to close, we know that the stores are sourcing from puppy mills because there's no way to fill your cages with 8-week-old dogs of all the varieties of popular breeds unless you're sourcing from puppy mills. And by passing this bill, we won't solve all the problems of the world, but New Hampshire will be doing its part to stem the flow of these dogs into our state. Thank you.
Questions from the committee? Senator Altshuler, get your hand up.
Okay, and and in addition to the 7 towns that passed a resolution against this in New Hampshire, I am passing around a petition with more than 300 signatures of citizens who are opposed to selling dogs in stores.
Thank you very much. Catherine Davis. Catherine Davis, Varney.
Yes, Barnett.
Varney.
Thank you for listening to me. I'm not a paid person. I'm a person that's been doing, I'm just going to read this. It's easier for me. Sure. All right. And wait, I don't want to waste your time because your time's valuable. I'm for this bill. Dear Chairman and Vice Chair and committee members, my name is Catherine Davis Varney. I retired last year of owning a pet care business on the seacoast of New Hampshire for almost 20 years. During my years living in Stratham, New Hampshire, working for clients taking care of their puppies, I started to notice sick puppies coming from a store in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I started to investigate why this was happening. I accumulated at the time, by the right to know law, vet certificates, which I can't mention anymore because they're not allowed, but it showed me where these puppies were coming from in Missouri and out west, these mills, and I would connect them with the list, with the Bailing Out Benji and the Humane Society. And a lot of them were on the 100 top horrible list. I educated, so what I did is, I kind of knew what was happening, but I wanted to educate myself further. And I worked with animal control officers and police officers in Maine and New Hampshire and started my journey to become an activist, not an extremist. I'm just a grandmother, to put a stop to the train of mill pups being trucked into New Hampshire and Maine. I started by educating the public one person at a time by protesting store by store starting in 2017. So far, 2 have closed, and I'm going for it. I'm 66, I have 20 years left, and I'm going to continue doing it until I die, and I'll teach my grandkids about this. And I hope you'll pass this bill so I don't have to keep coming to the State House. I was there for the main bill, LD 1311, second time around in 2019, and it was eventually passed that year. In 2020, the first bill was introduced to the state of New Hampshire. Julia Seeley was the director at that time of New Hampshire, the Humane Society, and a late state rep, Catherine Rogers of Concord. We lost a valuable person in her. She passed from cancer. So I'm here on her behalf too. Sponsored it, and we had our first HB 1388, which normally, first bills normally don't pass. This is the second round. I wanted to pass. Now, here we are, second time around with 541. Currently, while waiting to bring this bill to New Hampshire, towns have been doing their grassroots banning of retail stores, which Joan has talked about, for puppies and kittens in the state. And so far, the records show about 7 towns. What I know is every town so far that has put a warrant article resolution on their ballot, it passes. People don't want these stores in a town or city. What I know from the past 8 years, from my experience firsthand, fact, puppies sold at any pet store, and that's what we're talking about here, a retail establishment, all right? We're not talking about any shelters. We're not talking about breeders, because I have testimony in here with breeders too, that I entered last time around for the first bill that came in. They're not going to sell any puppy to a retail establishment. Puppies sold at any pet store is a mill dog. Just because they're registered at the AKC does not guarantee they are from a responsible breeder, as they would never ever sell to a retail store. Fact, puppies in pet stores are not always a careful thought, as it is an emotional buy, and the pet store knows this, and they have the financing for them to keep their product moving. As a pet care person, I've adopted 2 dogs from clients that were emotional buys, and they had health issues their entire life. Shelters are overloaded because of these puppies coming in to these pet stores. That's what's happening. Fact, puppies sold at any pet store is a mill dog. I keep saying it. Just because they are registered by the AKC does not guarantee they are from a responsible breeder, as they would never sell to a retail store. Feel free to go to an AKC marketplace, which is on the computer, and they don't send you to a store. They give you tips on what to ask a breeder. How can you? It's a store, and most of these puppies have a broker, and it is, a breeder is usually the high-level mill area that they have been transported from. You'll never be able to see the parent where the puppy comes from. Fact, puppy mills operate for a profit with little concern about the health and treatment of the dogs in their care. The female breeding dog suffers the most. That's what we're here for, too. Put yourself in an airplane, sit down in the airport seat, and stay there for 7 years with a wire mesh underneath you. That's what these mill dogs go through. The breeding dog, the puppy gets a life because they might be sick or not bred properly, but they'll have a better life. The female breeding dog suffers the most. They spend their entire life in a cage approved by the USDA and are bred every heat cycle until they can't produce pups. I would like to suggest you watch a 2015 documentary called Dog by Dog. It's produced by Christopher Grimes, an examination of the profitable puppy mill industry. Warning, it's real and harsh. Reality, you really need to see it if you're going to vote on this bill. Dog by Dog. It's free right now on YouTube. It's going to the Netflix, so you can watch it. Fact, testimony standing from my last packet, veterinarian practicing in the Seacoast for 35 years, Mike Schaefer, great vet in Rye, New Hampshire. He documents, and I can send you these documents on email, the medical issues that he has treated over the years, upper respiratory infections, internal and external parasites, which result in large-scale breeding operations. Emergency Care Port City in Portsmouth wrote me, Dr. Robert Hillman, a great surgeon over at the emergency vet, wrote, patterns of illnesses emerged from this Portsmouth store, which I closed. I made sure that I did peaceful protesting. It has since closed. Behavioral issues from a renowned dog trainer on the Seacoast, In the Dog's Mind, Terrence Kirby, has stated and worked firsthand with mill pups that have been caged and isolated during critical socialization periods, demonstrate higher instances of shyness, fear-based aggression, and difficulty in housebreaking. I could go on. These are voters. These are New Hampshire voters that we're talking about. Fact, there are too many breeders for the USDA to inspect each facility. Let's get real. We add on more different, let's check this. It's not going to happen. I'm sorry. It's not going to happen. We need to decrease the amount of puppies coming in. The Purdue University Canine Care Certificate, I don't know if you heard of this one. A new concept states on their website, there is no standard definition of a puppy mill exists. We define puppy mills as a dog breeding facility where profit is clearly given priority over the well-being of the dogs. They are given the certificate by an independently audited program. Doesn't make sense to me because responsible breeders don't sell to pet stores. I have testimony from a well-known breeder, a Diane of Peace and Love Havanese in my files, that states the fact that mill pup breeders don't care where they send their puppies, they are out for the money. True breeders don't make a major profit on their puppies. They do it for the standard of the breed and the health. What I know is I don't want the state of New Hampshire to become a dumping ground of retail stores selling mill pups because every state around them is banning them. what I've told Governor Sununu when I saw him in his signing in Salem, New Hampshire, just a little while, about a year ago, a while ago. Remember this face. I want you to remember my face, because I'm not giving up. I'm not giving up. I know he's ending his term in 2024. I want him to sign this bill. He told me he would. He told me he would. It's just, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not a pretty snowflake that melts. I'm like a piece of gum under the desk that you feel and you scrape, you can't get it off. So with that, I hope you pass that bill, and I hope that these dogs finally get some freedom of being stuck in a small cage for 7 years. So pick yourself on when you go flying next time. Sit there for 7 years.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there questions from the committee? Senator Alshula.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for your testimony and your advocacy. In reviewing this particular piece of legislation, you brought up what I also agree is a gap, and I think what we're all trying to get to is the dog being bred, right? So it's my understanding, and maybe there's someone in the audience who knows, can confirm or, set me right, that a dog, in order to live a healthy and happy life, shouldn't be bred more than 3 to 4 times in its lifetime, and not until after its 2nd birthday. Is that,
I'm not a
that's
vet.
what I'm
not a vet.
That's what my research so far has told me. No one has mentioned that thus far. But it seems that we're talking a lot about the puppies that come out of this breeding, and less breeding is less puppies, and less breeding is more humane to the dogs being bred. So is that where you're going with this? Is that we need to back up from the puppies back to the dogs being bred?
Yeah, I want to
Okay.
stop them. I know it's not going to stop completely, but you talk about regulations, it's not going to help. They say, oh, they have licenses, they have this. They're only going to get more money out of people. They're not going to change the fact that there are really horrendous mills out there that they're coming into the state of New Hampshire. And so the only way to do that is to at least stop the progress of this Amazon puppy store chain and stop it. Maine's done that. I haven't heard any grumbles there. I haven't heard any grumbles. I've heard they've only increased, the breeders, they're happy because the breeders are breeding carefully, and they still, sadly, these other stores are still operating. I haven't heard any grumbles from them, so I don't know what the problem is. I really don't. I'm frustrated. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. And we still have 6 more people to testify, and I'm going to ask you, if you have written testimony, just to turn that in and give us a quick synopsis of what you're saying, just for the sake of time. I want to be fair with everybody, but we are running out of time. And with that, George Cook. Yep. And Angela, are you with George? No? Oh, you just got disowned. Yeah, if you don't mind, if we can get, because we're going to get kicked out, so you have the floor.
There we go.
I have not been promoted to commissioner, but that's okay. Chair's good.
Chair, yes. Actually, speaking of the commissioner, I'm very, very glad to have heard his earlier comments because he filled in quite a few holes in what I know to be true. I've given you my written testimony. The thing that I am most interested for the committee to understand is that this bill, by conflating the legislation that was worked on very, very hard to establish the pet vendor statute to now completely change the interpretation of the pet vendor into automatically a retail pet store, is ludicrous, because anyone who is a pet vendor who is transferring animals, they must be doing that out of a physical facility. And though their intent is not to be a retail pet sale facility, if you are selling individual animals and if you're selling them out of your home, then that home is a physical facility. And that is not the intent of the hard work that went into defining the pet vendor category to differentiate and replace the old definition, which was a very poor definition of what a commercial kennel was. I'm going to skip ahead to a couple of examples which are in my testimony, but basically, one of the things that is ludicrous in this bill is that a retail pet store is encouraged to allow an animal shelter facility to exhibit available dogs in their premises. If that retail pet store now is a rescue, it's an absurd offer because the shelters and the rescues are in competition for the same market, and they're getting the dogs from the same locations. That was what was so striking about Commissioner Jasper's verification that the out-of-state dogs are coming in to shelters, they are coming in to rescues. And that is where the problem is, and this bill does not do anything to stop the importation of those unknown, unregistered, unregulated dogs. The other thing that I want to point out is that there's been lots of discussion about the sight unseen transfers of dogs. The methodology section of the bill says that that's an impossible thing to regulate, the sight unseen sales of dogs. One sight unseen sale of dogs requires you to have been licensed by the USDA. If you own more than 4 breeding females and sell 1 dog sight unseen, that is an Animal Welfare Act violation, and that's federal legislation, so that already exists. Whether it's enforced or not, I don't think it is. But this bill, my opposition to it, is based upon the fact that it does not solve any existing problem, and in fact makes some of the problems worse. Welcome any questions.
Questions from the committee? Thank you very much, and for your brevity and for your written testimony. Angela? Ferrari, like the car? I'm sure you're asked. Yeah. Yeah.
Is red good? Okay. Angela Ferrari, I'm here on behalf of dog owners of the Granite State. For those of you who aren't familiar with our club, we were founded in 1991 to represent the interests of all pet owners in New Hampshire. I'm going to speed through. As requested, I did send my testimony. Actually, let me hand this to you.
Yeah. If you could, it would be really helpful.
First, I just want to mention that the AKC does not inspect pet stores. They inspect the breeders based on registration numbers or by complaint. So they are not actively doing any of the inspections. As we all know, our Department of Agriculture actually does annual inspections when they're licensing pet vendors, and that would include pet stores. So we do have a whole document of rules on how to inspect our pet vendors that currently exists. Agriculture 1700 covers that. The retail pet store, meaning a pet vendor, is going to lump in and eliminate the breeder pet vendors in New Hampshire. And I know there's been a little bit of concern about if that's true or if it's not. As stated by the commissioner, this bill defines pet stores as pet vendors, which the definition of breeder now fall under. Pet vendors are required to identify a physical address. And I actually have the application to license pet vendors where it is requiring their physical address to be listed of their premises to be licensed as part of the license application. Thereby, they will be considered having a physical facility, which is mentioned in this bill as part of the retail pet store definition. Also mentioned in Agriculture 1704, which I mentioned previously, is the rules for inspecting a pet vendor. In 1704-01 is animal facilities. So I just wanted to mention that there's another spot where we're calling the facility that's being licensed a facility. While there is no legal term for physical facility, it is commonly understood to mean that you are physically located in the state rather than doing all remote or electronic sales. So just more proof behind the fact we are pulling in all of our responsible breeders who are licensed as pet vendors into the retail pet store space. So that leads into the concern about if we are no longer having our responsible breeders here in New Hampshire, nor the pet stores to supply the purebred dogs, and we're only continuing to increase the shelters and rescues, they're going to continue to bring in more animals, and we have heard about the regulations that those go through that aren't always followed. In speaking with various New Hampshire veterinarians, there was more concern with the health of rescue dogs in comparison to those seen from pet stores. And this bill will actually increase imported rescue animals and those purchased online from online sellers into New Hampshire, which in turn increases disease, such as the canine respiratory illness we've had running rampant throughout our state. We also have seen parvo and distemper cases increasing, parasite cases increasing, and including parasitic immunity to standard treatments. These are not due to purebred dogs and cat sales, but due to rescues to ignore our laws and importation into New Hampshire.
All right, I got less than 20 minutes, so
Okay.
I want to cut to a chase on one question,
Yep.
which you have highlighted in the antitrust situation.
Yes.
And then if you can close with that, and I will definitely read your testimony, but I appreciate your testimony. I still got a couple more people to
Yep,
talk.
no problem. I will just request that you take a look at the methodology section of this bill. The commissioner outlined a lot of great points in there. He did hit on some of them earlier, but I think if you read through that, you'll find that very important. Lastly, restraint of trade. In New Hampshire antitrust law, you'll see it highlighted in my testimony. It's outlined that every contract, combination, or conspiracy in restraint of trade, or which has the effect or purpose of, I will skip the first bullet and jump to the second bullet, which is highlighted, fixing, controlling, maintaining, limiting, or discontinuing the production, manufacture, mining, sale, or distribution of any commodity or service. So by us limiting what a retail pet store can provide for products, including puppies and kittens, we have concerns with the New Hampshire antitrust law. One final comment, I promise. In 2020, as mentioned, the House Environment and Agriculture Committee saw a similar bill. This one's actually even worse, if that's possible. And that bill was voted ITL 20-0. So I would take any questions.
Thank you very much for being brief and for very articulate. Questions from the committee?
I think she did it.
You did a good job.
Thank
Well
you
done.
very much.
Thank you. Nancy Holmes? I feel your pain sometimes. I do. Not as. Yep. I still have a couple more people and I have less than 15 minutes, so I hate to rush you. All right.
Turn it on, thank you much. And we'll just slide this chair back so I can sit. There we go. I have two sets of testimony there. One was my original one, which is double-sided, and one was a follow-up one that I did when I realized you were probably going to have a very short amount of time left for me by the time we got there.
Thank you.
But I'm going to address a couple of points that I heard that I think are an issue. The person responsible for the health of puppies in a pet store is the veterinarian who is signing the health certificate stating that the puppy is healthy for sale. If the puppy is not healthy for sale, And there's going to be an exception that has to be noted on the health certificate. If you've got pet stores that are selling puppies with falsified health certificates, you've got a real problem, but the problem goes to the Department of Agriculture. Okay, so that was one thing. The other thing is, there's a pejorative word that's used a lot in these kind of testimonies, and that's a puppy mill.
Yep.
The issue is, the breeders, the commercial breeders who produce puppies and cats for sale, are as different as everybody in this room. Some of those places, their primary business is running a meth lab out back, and the pups and dogs are just an extra income. Some of them are people of a particular religious segment, that this is one of the animals that they raise and sell commercially. Another is the commercial breeder who this is the way they save their farm, is they sell puppies and kittens to save their farm, because that is the best use they can get of their land for whatever reason right now. So they vary, and therefore the quality of what comes out of these areas also varies. I don't know, if I was running a pet store, I for darn sure would not be buying a sick puppy who's going to cost me vet bills if I could buy a healthy puppy from a different broker. But okay, I just wanted to cover those couple of things, so I think it's an issue. I can tell you that I have been in the past both a successful breeder of show dogs, and also I have done rescue. So I kind of have a background, and I'm sorry, I don't know if I gave you my name, it's Nancy Holmes. And so I have a background in both areas, and I have had a lot of contacts and a lot of education in both areas. I'm completely opposed to this bill. It definitely includes the larger scale dog breeders in this state who have chosen to be running their operations legally and being licensed and inspected and following all the rules by the State Department. This will wipe them out. This bill also eliminates the chance for you to sell your business. If you have a breeding kennel and you don't have a family member who's going to pick it up, I think Commissioner Jasper mentioned this, but I think it needs to be emphasized, is that you now no longer can sell your property for another person to come in and run a business there. Yeah, sure, they'd have to go through the license process as it is now, but now you're saying, okay, all those improvements you made on your property in order to be able to commercially breed dogs, oh well, you know, the town's still going to tax you on them, but you aren't going to be able to make any money off of them. And I do deplore the fact that some dogs need help in finding a new home. That's sad. What is the reason for it? The most common reason that I have seen in all the years I did rescue that dogs need a new home is that it was a poor match of dog and owner in the beginning. Okay? So what I'm looking at with this bill is not going to improve any of that. SB 541 outlines a plan to eliminate licensed breeders and pet stores over time, leaving consumers with only, as I see it, the following sources for pets: shelters and rescues. Responsible breeders who produce pups by law fewer than 30 a year and cannot meet consumer demand in New Hampshire. Small breeders that produce a few litters, sometimes by mistake. They often claim not to be breeders at all and get really, really mad at you, I can tell you, if you suggest that they are a breeder.
I'm going to have to push it forward.
Okay, push it. Okay, out-of-state breeders, which will be the only place to get a purebred, and illegal large-volume local breeders who are not licensed or inspected and can be rated to gain shelters, both new stock to sell and massive publicity for positive news stories. I know it's going to annoy people, but that's what I see happening. I think this bill deprives people of their livelihoods. It eliminates expansion or traps them into remaining at a 2023 transfer number, which in my longer testimony that I handed out, I outlined some of the things that could cause that. And it doesn't take into account the fact that costs are constantly rising to raise a dog. It devalues people's property by making it impossible for the new owner to continue with a business there. This law does nothing good for the New Hampshire economy, New Hampshire pets, or the New Hampshire consumers. And I think if you're concerned about what goes on in pet stores in the state, you're looking in the wrong direction and you're not looking at the right problem. All right, I'm happy to answer any questions. I do ask that you please read the whole testimony, because I've got 2 pages. I went point by point through the bill.
And I apologize for running out of time, but I thank you very much for your written testimony. And other questions from the committee?
I added my email on one of them, so I'm happy to take email questions too.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, and so now we have Craig. Craig, I got you. I'm sorry that it's taking so much time here. But we got to, I still have one more speaker after you.
I'll be real quick here. My name's Craig Shaughnessy. Thank you, senators, for giving me this opportunity to speak. Anytime I hear about regulations on pet stores, I'm like, well, that's what I am. So I have to go and let you folks know my experience with the customers in New Hampshire, and some that come up from Mass, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Long Island. People are traveling hundreds of miles. There's an issue here where they can't get, I sell golden retrievers, CS Golden Adoption Service in Wyndham. We have an A+ rating. I am the model. I invented it just from caring for the pups. We love these pups, my wife and I, and we love our customers. Our customers, I must get 2 or 3 fan mails a week from the existing customers with the photos. I'll be happy to send you 100 pages of emails and photos. You've changed our life. My children, people with mental disabilities, vets. I see a lot of people walking out the door crying, and they say they've been looking for a golden retriever for 2 years, and I've changed their life. There's a need here, and it can be done right. I've been doing this since 2009, not one complaint. If there's a sick pup, we hold on to it. We love the puppies. We don't keep them in cages. We give applications. We house train them. There's an area, we take them in and out, cuddle with them. If one's shy, we meet their affection quota. We send an application out and so forth. So I didn't know if this was the kind of bill that you could oppose just striking partial text on this. But the 2 texts that I wanted to strike out on was, number 1, Section 3 on page 1, line 25. The transfer of a dog would not cause the retail pet store to have more transfer of dogs or cats for the calendar year than the retail pet store completed in 2023. I think it would be fair if you don't shut us down. I mean, I'd say let the new pet stores come in and shut down the bad ones. Say in the state of New Hampshire, we're going to have 5 Craigs that do this right. If you don't do it right, you're out. We'll take a new one in. That way, you're offering New Hampshire residents a way to not get scammed, to not get a refund. There's a 14-day mandate, but we give them a 2-year congenital and genetic guarantee. We give them house trained. I'm selling to surgeons at Mass General, psychiatrists, CEOs of companies. The president of the New York Stock Exchange came all the way to New Hampshire, Tom Farley, to get a pup from us.
You got 1 more minute.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is there is a value in this to your residents in New Hampshire. We had a couple of doctors holding a pup saying, we're just glad to be holding a pup, and we lost our money. So the 2023 numbers, whoever sponsored this bill knows we're coming off of a pandemic, and the shelters got full. COVID will be back. People will be alone. You know, there's a lot of people that need this companionship. So golden retrievers may be the magic of it. You'll never find a golden retriever in a shelter. You'll never find one without a home. If you're a golden retriever, you're resilient and you can bounce back. Do I use large commercial breeders? No. I found a couple of farmers that each had 2 or 3 goldens each, and I said, look, you need a USDA license to sell to me. So we went through the steps, got them a USDA license, and there's 5 brothers in their 20s and 30s, and they're getting married. They work farms. So they're like, okay, we'll each have 3 golden retrievers. We'll do what Craig says and not send them with parasites. They have to be socialized at 5 to 6, 7 weeks old. And I don't know what's going on with the pet stores, but there is a way to service your residents in the state of New Hampshire so they don't get scammed or they don't have parvo in the parking lot at PetSmart. So there is a value here. The nightmares that have been described in this room, I've never seen. I'm in horror of being categorized in this type of group. But because of what I do, I fit under the pet store license, but it can be done right. So I'm just saying, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, you know? That's it.
Thank
Any
you very
questions?
much. We're not going to have time.
All right.
I have 3 minutes for the next speaker.
Okay, yeah.
And then I'm done, and I'm going to
All
go
right.
in 3 minutes. So,
Thank you.
Nicola, you got 3 minutes, and I'm sorry, but that's what you got.
Understood. Firstly, there is a difference between animal shelters and pet stores. It's in practice and it's in legal definition. Has anyone here heard of the New Hampshire Rev, I don't even know how to pronounce this, Rev Statute 4371? It says, animal shelter facility means a facility including the building and the immediate surrounding area which is used to house or contain animals, or which is owned or leased, operated and maintained by a duly incorporated humane society, animal welfare society, society for the prevention of cruelty to animals, or other blah, blah, blah. Essentially, there is a difference. And there's also a difference in practice because, bailing out Benji, they find out where the puppy mills, like they'll find puppy mills in Missouri and whatnot. And they'll take the certificate of veterinary inspection and they'll know like where it's coming from. And they'll post online like, okay, these pet stores bought from these illegal places. You look on there, you're not going to find shelters on that website. You're going to find pet stores. Next, next you have to think about how these lemon laws aren't going to change a thing, because we all know that when you do inbreeding, there's genetic issues, right? And they're not necessarily always going to present themselves within 2 weeks or even 1 year. They could present themselves years later. So that the idea that these lemon laws are going to fix anything is not true. The idea that more inspections and more regulations is going to fix anything isn't true either, because in Missouri, for example, there's a lot of breeders that get these violations and whatnot, and they fight them. Pinnacle Pet, for example. Pinnacle Pet had a violation for having 9 puppies die in the back of one of their transports, because obviously if you're in a different state and you have to bring it here, you have to move the pets in a truck. They had 9 pets die, and you know what? They fought that violation. They got it removed. So obviously, if they can fight these violations this easily, it happens all the time, then such regulation isn't going to help that at all. Next, some people have mentioned that if you support this bill, that it's going to increase sales for other puppy mills, online puppy mills. That is only somewhat true, because let's say that we get let's say this stops puppy mills, then you're going to have increased demand on the breeders as well. But next, you have to think about, they're both coming from the same place. The pet store and the online store, they're both coming from the puppy mill. What difference does it make? The difference that it makes is that people can't impulse buy nearly as much with that. People can't walk into the store and not know where the puppy. There has to be more research done if you're going to buy it online. I do understand there's scams and whatnot, but at the same time, there's going to be less. There's overall, it's just there's no way. People are going to buy less from these puppy mills overall. There's going to be less demand on the puppy mills. Some people mention that people come into state and sell from other states. I guess that is true. But once again, it's the same deal. It's about what's going to decrease the demand the most, and this bill is going to decrease the demand the most.
Nick,
that's it.
You get 1 minute left.
1 minute left. Let me open up my document real quick, so I had a few points.
Now you have 50 seconds.
Yes. I'll use my 30 seconds or whatever I have, and obviously it's going to increase demand for breeders, because if there's less people buying from these puppy mills, then obviously there's going to be more people buying from breeders. And if you want to protect breeders' rights as well, you can consider a litter limit as well. Because for example, like if I'm breed, which I don't breed, but if I were to breed a larger dog, it's going to have more dogs per litter. And if you consider some sort of litter limit, that would 100% protect breeders' rights.
I think somebody else mentioned something about that as well. So thank you very much for your testimony. And I'm sorry we had to cut you off at such a time, but they're cutting me off, so that's how it goes.
I
Appreciate
understand.
your testimony. Thank you. And you can shut off your mic if you don't mind. And
How'd I
with
do
that,
that?
we're going to close the hearing. And thank you all for taking time to testify. We appreciate it.
All right, good job. We got
We got there.
managed to get my 3 bills in. It's causing chaos in the Commerce Committee on one of them, that's for sure.
It's like getting the grandkids all excited and walking out the door.